across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Monday afternoon, and there's so much to talk about. Donald Trump has just told an American network that he will 100% follow through with tariffs. That could be tariffs on you and me, on anything we want to buy or sell to America. Lots of small business owners, lots of consumers worried about that. The Prime Minister talking about the situation this morning. What do you think about it? Is this all just overblown, or do you honestly think that Donald Trump would invade Greenland and or take it over by paying for it in whatever sense that would be? The Greenlanders themselves are fed up with Denmark, some of them. They say they don't want to be part of America. It's a very interesting thing that of course affects us here in the UK because of our alliances right across the world with other countries too. And Keir Starmer has been stronger, some would argue, certainly said stronger things to President Trump than he has on any other occasion. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Vladimir Putin being asked to join the Peace Council in Gaza. Yes, really. Andrew Rossendale defecting to Reform UK, another MP. They now have 7. We'll talk to Jack Elsom about that, the political editor of The Sun, and Danny Kruger, who of course defected from the Conservatives. He was the first. Now we have the second and third too. We'll talk about the police in Britain's first Big Brother town, catching criminals every 34 minutes using facial recognition cameras. Is that a good thing that we can finally catch these criminals, some of whom have been on the run for 20 years, or is this just another step towards Big Brother society where they monitor our every move? We've got some top American analysts as well coming up, and we'll talk about the US considering asylum for British Jews, and West Midlands police apparently ignoring a string of hate crimes against Jews too. Also, the number of schools commemorating the Holocaust has halved since the 7th of October attacks nearly 3 years ago. We'll talk about all of that. I want your views on all of it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute please, on 0344 499 1000. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 7 o'clock here on Talk Drive. Well, let's just have a look at what the Prime Minister was saying earlier today. He called an emergency press conference and news conference, and a speech as well at Downing Street earlier today, speaking about the situation in America as he addressed the nation.
The UK and the US are close allies and close partners. That relationship matters profoundly, not just to our security, but to the prosperity and the stability that people here depend upon. Under President Trump, as under previous presidents, we're determined to keep that relationship strong, constructive, and focused on results.
Well, we'll talk about that now with Tobias Ellwood. He's the former Defence Minister, former Chairman of the Defence Select Committee. Tobias, thank you for coming on today. What do you make of what Keir Starmer has done? Where are we with the special relationship? We have Donald Trump, who says that he's going to take over Greenland in whatever way he wants, essentially, whether that is purchase, whether that is the Greenlanders deciding they want to be part of America, which seems unlikely, or potentially by military action. Just give us your assessment of this.
Well, good afternoon. What a month it has been. We've not even finished January, and look how geopolitically unstable our world seems to be becoming, not because of what China or Russia is doing, but because of Donald Trump. And I think the Prime Minister's right, and I hope the other parties get behind it. This is about looking after Britain's interests and recognizing that where Donald Trump is taking this is escalating. This is now the biggest test, no doubt about it, of our relationship with America since the Second World War. We have come to expect the unexpected from Donald Trump, but this latest action of lashing out economically at fellow NATO members who dare to stand up, including Britain, because Donald Trump wants to take part of NATO for himself, I think confirms what many of us have been saying for a long time, that Donald Trump wants to disengage from Europe, doesn't care for Europe and wants to go completely unilateral. If this genuinely was about security, which he claims, he could easily bolster his own troop numbers as part of NATO, or indeed as the country is just US alone, from 200, I think, up to the thousands that we had during the Cold War. If this was about Russia being a threat, then why doesn't he help us out in Ukraine in pushing Russia back from there, rather than allowing Russia to move to a war footing?
Isn't there a confused message from the United States on Russia? Because if he wants to push Russia back, he could do what you say, certainly. He's also asked Putin and others to be part of the Peace Council for Gaza. We'll perhaps talk about more about that in a second or two. And he's pushing back against NATO countries. Is this, am I wrong, or is this just a confused and confusing message?
No, you're absolutely right. And that's why you need to take a step back from all these pieces of the jigsaw and put them all together. And then you see that there is an absolute deliberate policy change from Donald Trump to move America into a more isolationist, unilateral and disruptive place where he can use force to project his own perspectives on the world. Venezuela was a great example of that. And I suspect he's a little punch drunk by what's going on. He's given up on supporting global order, and he's picked up in America, and this is quite important.
Do you really believe that's the case, Tobias? He's given up on the global order. I mean, we had the president,
Oh, yeah.
Well, we saw the president texting the leader of Norway, for example, complaining about not getting the Nobel Peace Prize, but he says no one has done more for NATO than any person since the formation of NATO. So clearly in Donald Trump's mind, he has at least some connection and some support for NATO.
No, not at all. I mean, it was very clear at the last NATO summit that everybody was begging Donald Trump not to depart. John Bolton made it clear in his book during Trump 1.0 that he didn't know at a summit back then whether unilaterally Trump was going to walk out of NATO then. If you read the national security strategy that came out in last November, the American one, it's very clear that America is disengaging from Europe and focusing on its own hemisphere, has no interest in international organizations such as the United Nations. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 5 years, under Donald Trump certainly, we see the United States disengage from the World Trade Organization, the United Nations, and indeed NATO. He sees no value in staying with them. More so, he sees value in developing transactional relationships with those that can help America, one of which is Russia, because of it's got its own minerals and its own fuel. America is reliant on Russia for nuclear fuel to keep its nuclear program growing. So these are the bonds that Trump is now reevaluating, so different from every other American president that absolutely had a vested interest in supporting our global order.
Let's have a think about what this means for the UK, what it means trade-wise, what it means defence-wise. Just taking what Prime Minister Starmer has said today, do you think his stance is the right one? And also, what could this mean? What could these tariffs mean for this country?
Yeah, lots of big, important questions there. I mean, for one, does Donald Trump actually have the backing of his own party, his own administration, and indeed Congress? So these are other questions that I think over time we will understand. But you're right to place the concern about how this could actually unravel, because our security relationship is absolutely entwined with the United States. Our nuclear capability, our nuclear deterrent leans heavily on American capability. The F-35 fighter is one of those collaborations that, were we to split apart, would have huge consequences for the ability of our RAF to patrol our skies. And that's just the start of it, right across the piece in every domain, including sharing of intelligence. The bottom line that you heard the Prime Minister confirm is that we are actually stronger together. And if Britain is distracted, Europe is distracted because of Russia, we actually can't come to help America in its time of need. And the one time Article 5, that NATO article, has been used, we were there. We were up there. So were so many other nations, including Denmark, were there to support America in its hour of need. That's what Donald Trump needs to be persuaded in, recognizing going alone won't, in the long term, help the United States, but it will help our adversaries.
Tell me what you think of what Denmark could do to the United States, because there are crucial things like pharmaceuticals, for example, that go to the United States that they could have a trade war with, what the EU is doing, and again, what it means trade-wise for the UK.
Yeah, I mean, the whole trade aspect of this is huge. The power of the EU, of Europe, of Britain, when we all get together and feel that this is the only tool that we can use to persuade America will be huge. And as I say, damaging for both sides. There's another dimension to this as well, which is the tech side, is you can see that the regulations would come in. The one aspect that Donald Trump requires support from is his own tech industry, all those tech giants. Now, you could see Europe then lashing back and saying, right, we're going to put in greater regulations to prevent you from being able to use our domains, our areas. So you can see this takes us down a very dark road indeed, a huge distraction from the wider international challenges of our global order already unraveling because China and Russia and others are taking advantage of just how timid and how fragile it's become.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting to think about all of that. I just wonder what you make of Vladimir Putin being invited to join the Peace Council for Gaza. And it's not just him, it's many other nations as well, up to 60 different players who would have to pay $1 billion to do so. Tell me your thoughts on this.
I think we're still trying to unpick this and understand it as well. But it underlines exactly what we've just saying, is that Donald Trump has long seen Putin as an ally, as a friend, as someone that he can trust. For that, we're still scratching our heads determining how that actually works. To have Russia in the long term involved in international peace is a good thing, but it completely ignores the fact that he himself is wanted by the international courts, is sending missiles on a daily basis to Ukraine, and actually is trying to redraw the map of Eastern Europe. Why you would then want that individual on any form, any committee whatsoever, is baffling indeed.
Tobias, thank you. That's Tobias Ellwood there, former chairman of the Defence Select Committee. He's also a former Defence Minister. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including John Morgan, who says, that speech, can you imagine if we were going to war and Starmer was giving a rabble-rousing speech? Oh my goodness, it'd be we'd fight them on the mattresses because we'd all be asleep. Another person says, hearing people like Tobias Ellwood insult Trump, it's inevitable America no longer sees us as friends. Damon in Wigan says, why is it when our Prime Minister stands up and dispatches a speech, no one's interested in what he has to say? And why can't he stand up to the US President and say, no, I don't agree with this issue, and make it sound like he means it? Well, we know, Damon, that he spoke to him on the phone, and he did deliver that rebuke and did essentially say he doesn't agree with the plan on Greenland, which is a complicated one, and one which I wonder whether he would follow through with military action. That seems to me to be a bit far. Instead of making us look weak and completely out of touch, says Damon, I'm ashamed of Keir Starmer being our Prime Minister, and he needs to start standing up and be counted. So thank you very much indeed for that, Damon. Appreciate that. There's lots in that. There's lots in this debate. The Starmer saying Trump's Greenland threat is completely wrong. Playing down retaliatory tariffs. We're not at tariffs just yet, but tariffs could mean an awful lot for our industry, could mean a lot for our exports, could mean a lot for people here if they are imposed, and we know that from other countries where that has happened. What's also happened with military action is that President Trump has often said he's going to do something and then he goes through and does it. He's usually pretty consistent when it comes to Venezuela, Iran, Israel, for example. He's been pretty consistent on all of those things, although specifically with Iran more recently, there's some disappointed that he has not come to the aid of some of those protesters, certainly, and some feel let down by that. It's very interesting as well when we think back about what the EU would do versus what we as a country that is Brexited would actually do too. I want your views on all of this. It's a complicated subject, but really, do you support President Trump? Do you think he should take Greenland? And what should we do in this country about that? Because I don't know about you, I want America to be our friend. I don't agree with every single thing that President Trump does and says. Of course I don't, but at the same time, he does seem to look on us relatively favourably, although in the last 24 hours or so, you may disagree with that. Whatever your thoughts on that, whether you think I'm talking nonsense or sense, 0344 499 1000. We'll speak to Isabel Oakeshott in just a few minutes as well, our international editor, to get her view on this and the defections within Reform UK. It was very interesting, Andrew Rossendale, the Conservative MP, now defecting as well. So Reform UK have 7 MPs, 3 of them are Conservatives who have defected from the Conservatives. And do you feel as if this is a good thing, or whether Reform UK is becoming the continuity Conservatives? Whatever your view on that, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks for your tweets, everybody. Really appreciate them. James says, Tobias Elwood has a massive case of TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. When is he defecting to the Lib Dems? Angela says, I don't think Tobias Elwood, who keeps predicting World War III and is a known Trump hater, is a fair person to assess the situation with Donald Trump. Well, listen, he has his opinion on it, and so does Isabel Oakeshott, who we'll speak to in a second. Rosie says, it strikes me that President Trump hates Starmer. If Nigel Farage was Prime Minister, it would be a whole different kettle of fish. As for Tobias Elwood, words fail me. Well, let's go back to what Trump has been saying himself. He says, President Trump says, Europe should focus on the war in Ukraine, not Greenland, and insisted he'll follow through with his tariff plan. He spoke to NBC News. He said he will 100% hit European nations with tariffs if a deal cannot be made over Greenland. Europe ought to focus on the war with Russia and Ukraine because, frankly, you see what that's gotten them. That's what Europe should focus on, not Greenland. Asked if he would use force to seize Greenland, the President said no comment. He also dismissed the idea that Norway had no sway over the Nobel Peace Prize and said that the decision is entirely up to the committee. We know that he had texted the Norwegian Prime Minister saying that he should have got the Peace Prize, and also said that he had done more for NATO than any other person. He sent this letter, well, it was a text message actually, to the Norwegian Prime Minister, insisting he no longer feels obligated to think purely of peace because he had not been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Norway totally controls it, despite what they say. They like to say they have nothing to do with it, but they have everything to do with it, said Donald Trump. Well, let's speak to our international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Fascinating times, Isabel. What is your take on all of this? And especially for our viewers and listeners who might be thinking, what are tariffs going to actually, how are they going to affect us, especially if President Trump comes through with them? Very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Well, this has all escalated a lot more than I think I anticipated. I think starting from a very simple point, Trump is not going to invade Greenland. I think that is highly unlikely. And the defence contacts that I've spoken to are pretty clear on that. What they think is going on here is what I think probably most people imagine, which is a kind of classic Trump rhetorical game in which what he's trying to do is get the EU and the UK to up their defence spending generally by sabre rattling and indicating that, you know, potentially he might pull out of NATO and then we'll be on our own. And if he were to be kind of able to buy Greenland, as it were, then he might feel he no longer particularly needs NATO allies, because he'd have that kind of great big area of influence and buffer zone, if you like. He'd have that security. Now, the other thing that is going on here is not just about American access to Greenland's mineral resources, but more about making sure that the Chinese don't have that access. And that is, you know, we talked a lot in this whole debate about what's going on in Greenland about Russia and China, but I think China is at least as important in the calculations that are going on. And there's a real dilemma for Starmer in how to handle this, or at least there ought to be a dilemma. Starmer's instincts, of course, are to sort of side with whatever the EU wants, and I think that's a trap for the UK. The UK could play quite an important and influential role here, actually being the kind of broker between where the EU stands on all of this and where the US stands. But unfortunately, Starmer's instincts are always sort of to tack towards Ursula von der Leyen and his old EU pals.
It's interesting what the thoughts on tariffs as well. I've got a very interesting message from Mary in County Down, who says Trump's policy on tariffs was nicknamed TACO for Trump always chickens out, due to his tendency to threaten high tariffs, only to withdraw the threat when he gets what he wants by other means, particularly negotiation. Can we all stop panicking now, please? Putting that together with your sources telling you there's no chance he's going to invade Greenland, should we actually be that worried, Isabel?
I mean, maybe not. You know, I just can't see a lot of this happening. But the thing about Trump and what is in a way so masterful about the way he manages international affairs is that there's just that little percentage of never quite know, isn't there? I mean, this is a president who is capable of doing pretty much anything, as we saw with what he's done in Venezuela. He's also capable of saying that he is going to do something by way of intervention in Iran and then not doing anything at all. He said, don't worry, to the dissidents, to those protesters on the street, help is coming. Well, help hasn't come. So he is not a president that we can remotely take at his word. And in a sense, you've always got to, if you're in charge of a country, whether it's the UK or the EU countries or whatever it is, you've always got to have a contingency plan just in case he actually follows through on some of the slightly more bonkers things that he sometimes floats.
I wonder as well, when he talks to the Prime Minister of Norway saying that no one's done more for NATO since NATO was established, do you think that's credible? And also whether you worry, as Tobias Ellwood has been, that he thinks that Trump would potentially withdraw from NATO, withdraw from the WTO, withdraw from the United Nations, become a much more isolationist nation. Do you think that's credible?
Well, I mean, I think it's some of it's credible. Just going back to what I said previously, you never know with Trump. You remember the outrage when he withdrew from the Paris Agreement on climate change, and he likes withdrawing from international treaties like this. I mean, I have to say that even as someone that admires Trump's leadership in many ways, some of the language he uses is pretty childish, isn't it? That memo, well, I didn't get the prize, so now I no longer need to think about peace, is sort of almost laughable. And when you consider what's at stake here, it's pretty concerning that it's being brought down to that level.
What do you make of the fact that it was Denmark themselves, actually, who colonised 3 islands, St Thomas, St John, and another island purchased by the United States in 1917, became known as the United States Virgin Islands. So the idea of US buying Greenland, hardly a wild and novel idea, is it? I mean, these things have happened before and have happened within the last sort of 100 or so years.
Well, I mean, we seem to be in the business of buying and selling islands ourselves.
With Chagos, yeah, exactly.
When I say we, I mean I'm certainly not part of any such thing. But this is a Labour administration that seems to think that buying and selling territory is entirely acceptable. And there is a huge inconsistency there, isn't there, in Starmer sort of standing up there saying it's a matter for the Greenlanders.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
To secure their own destiny. Well, what about the Chagosians? He didn't seem to have much care for them.
Very, very good point. There's another international story that I think is being forgotten here. We see it, of course, through the lens of Shamima Begum, who in theory could be back or could be out of Syria in a few days' time. But Syria in general, it's kicking off there. There was meant to be a ceasefire, but of course there've been many, many attacks between the government and the rebels there. Just bring us through that, Isabel, and tell us what it could mean for us.
Well, I mean, Syria has not had a lot of attention from the UK. You're talking about Syria at this point. I just want to check I heard you correctly.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Yes, so you're absolutely right that Syria has kind of fallen off the radar in terms of at least UK media coverage. I mean, it gets a huge amount here in the Middle East, where there's sort of every day there are updates on what's going on and the different alliances being formed. I think a lot of people sort of were labouring under the misapprehension that with its new president, formerly known as Jalani, a one-time jihadi type person, having been brought into the fold by President Trump, having been kind of normalised as a
sanitised. He even met Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, so he must be a lovely guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think people sort of thought, okay, we can just park Syria as everything's okay over there. And clearly that isn't the case at all. And I must admit, I've been lazy about following the ins and outs of just how stable various bits of Syria are. But it's something that I think we're going to need to re-engage with to some extent. Save insofar as we're pretty thinly stretched in terms of international crises at the moment, and there's so much going on everywhere.
Yeah.
Where do you put your attention? Frankly, at the moment, I am much more worried about what's happening in Iran, or rather what's not happening in Iran.
Certainly, we'll talk more about Syria's army and the Kurdish-led Syrian Defence Forces militia alliance and the fresh clashes there a little bit later on. But just before you go, let's return to a political matter in the UK, Isabel, because Andrew Rossendale has now joined Reform UK. I, for one, wasn't that shocked. His views are pretty clearly with Reform UK. I've actually had him in this studio and asked a number of times whether he would think of defecting, and he has never said absolutely not, that will never happen. Reform UK now have 7 MPs, 3 of them former Conservatives. Will that sit comfortably with the electorate? Will it sit comfortably with Nigel Farage?
Well, it must sit comfortably with Nigel Farage because he is the one who has welcomed those MPs into the Reform fold, and quite rightly so. People can't have it always. They can't, Reform's critics can't continually say Reform's a one-man band, Reform doesn't look like a government in waiting, Reform doesn't have enough experience, and then get all antsy when Reform welcomes MPs that have experience and can join the parliamentary party. I think the broader question is, does it alienate, to what extent does bringing in disaffected Tories into Reform's ranks, to what extent does that alienate Reform voters? And we know that some defections have gone down better than others, and there's no doubt that the defection of Robert Jenrick was hugely welcomed by most Reform members, because they can see that that Jenrick is ideologically aligned with them. But what they don't want, I think, is a merger. I mean, that is absolutely anathema to most Reform members, and certainly to Reform inclined voters who don't want to just think it's, they're all the same. That is the jeopardy for Reform. And I think Nigel, the leader, Nigel Farage, has thus far struck a really, really clever balance here. I don't envy his job, because he's got to sort of try to meet that you don't have enough experience, you're a one-man band thing, at the same time by not looking like Reform is just another version of the same old parties.
Yeah. Isabel, thank you. That's Isabel Oakeshott there, our international editor, and thanks to the texter who says, Putin and the peace pact, oh Lord, a call too far. Brian says, afternoon Peter, look on the bright side, we will be rid of Starmer when he goes off to his favourite place, Davos, later this week. Only thing is he keeps coming back. Well, Rachel Reeves, of course, will be there too, the Chancellor and the Business Secretary, Peter Kyle too. Tim is in South Wales and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Tim, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Peter, I've just pulled over. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, perfect. Peter, very briefly, I listened to Tobias Ellwood earlier, and he's discussing this matter as if everything is wine and roses in Europe and Britain at the moment. And I just look at it and think to myself, why on earth would Donald Trump want to take us seriously when we're arresting 12,000 people a year for hurting words? We've got no defence. We've just increased taxes to pay benefits. I mean, we're just not credible allies anymore. So why on earth would he think that we could contribute to the security of Greenland? And just one further point. The war in Greenland, or the problems in Greenland, aren't going to happen in the next 2 years or 3 years. With global warming, whatever's happening with that, the issues are going to be in 10, 20, 30 years' time. And he's dealing with problems now that are going to be facing us in the future. I mean, he's the first American president that actually seems to think ahead. Well,
that's a very interesting point, Tim, and thank you for it. And actually, it's echoed by a message from Benny in Belfast. He says, I'm stunned people are clutching their pearls over Greenland. Do politicians in the UK and Europe know absolutely nothing about US history? It has always protected its back and front yards and looked for commercial advantage. Why would it not? St Thomas, for example, right in the track of all vessels coming from Europe. In those days, there were major financial and trade considerations. These are the islands, the US Virgin Islands, as is the case with Greenland. So many people saying this is actually just a totally logical thing. Maybe you think so too. Let me know your thoughts on it. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk in just a second to Jack Elson, the political editor of The Sun, about what Starmer's been saying and about Andrew Rossendale as well. Keep your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes coming in. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you everybody for getting in touch. We'll come to more of your messages in a second, but I want to speak to Jack Elsom. Now, he's political editor of The Sun. Jack, a lot to talk about politically. We'll talk about Andrew Rossendale defecting to Reform UK in a minute, but Keir Starmer on Greenland, do you think he is distracted by this? Should he not just be simply focusing on our domestic problems? Is this actually that big a deal? Because Westminster seems to have lost its mind over it.
Well, good afternoon, Peter. I'm sure the Prime Minister would rather be talking about the cost of living crisis. In fact, he was meant to go to Yorkshire today to do a big speech really hamming up his achievements, or so-called achievements, we should say, on tackling the cost of living. But, you know, this is Trump's world and we're all living in it, literally and figuratively. And so the Prime Minister has had to react to events. I noticed that he did manage to shoehorn in references to prescription charges and energy bills while he was talking about the possible breaking up of the NATO alliance. I think that the Prime Minister thinks that he has done well on the world stage, and he was really trying to justify all of his jaunts, his trips, his international summits today. He says that things that happen around the world really do impact people's pockets at home, not least if Donald Trump actually does manage to increase his tariffs on British goods as well. So that clearly is something which he wanted to get across his point. In terms of the wider issue with Greenland, clearly there will be many of my readers and many of your viewers who think, why on earth should the British government be meddling in a very tiny populated island owned by another country, which is thousands of miles away? Keir Starmer would make the point that this does not just go to Greenland and who controls it, but actually the very nature of the NATO alliance, our relationship with the US and the US's place in the world. And so today he was very keen to gently rebuke the president. But it's that horrible Westminster cliche, isn't it? He was walking out diplomatic tightrope. He wanted to get his point across that he doesn't think the US should annex Greenland by force, but at the same time didn't want to incur the wrath of the president and ruin the bridges which he's built up with him.
Although the United States and many other countries have done these things, have acquired land, have acquired islands and various pieces of land for commercial advantage. And I'm sure there are many scratching their heads saying, when he says it's up to the Greenlanders to decide what happens to their island, well, what about the Chagos Islands? What about the fact that there has been essentially a sale of those, even though we seem to be paying for it somehow? I'm not entirely sure how. But for Keir Starmer, isn't there an element of hypocrisy here?
I think so. I think there's two things going on. For all of Keir Starmer's words today about how the future of Greenland is to be determined by Greenland, if Donald Trump decides to send American gunboats to the shores of Greenland and take this island by force, then nobody is going to stop him. Not Britain, not NATO allies, not Denmark, certainly not Greenlanders themselves. And no matter how uncomfortable that makes us in the West that believe in the old school international order and sovereignty and diplomatic norms, there is nothing that this country can do to stop America's military might if that is what Donald Trump tries to do. Now, it's interesting, Starmer said that he doesn't actually believe Trump when he says that he would take military force to invade the islands. And in terms of the wider point about hypocrisy, well, clearly there is something here because the Chagos Islands, again, despite the fact that not many people could probably point it out on the map, has become such a touchstone issue in this country, a pretty disgraceful giveaway of sovereignty, not just the giveaway in itself to an ally of China, Mauritius, but also the fact that we're paying billions of pounds for the privilege. And so there is that disconnect, I think, between Keir Starmer's geopolitical strategy here. And I think that is sort of irking people at home.
Tell me closer to home about Andrew Rossendale defecting to Reform UK. It was a 15-year-old on Twitter who seemed to scoop this story over the weekend. It was rubbish. And then, of course, Andrew Rossendale defects. So we now have 7 Reform UK MPs, 3 of them former Conservatives.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Rossendale is probably the best walking example of what a Tory defector would look like.
Sorry, Lee Anderson, four. I forgot about Lee Anderson, although he was briefly an independent, so
yes.
I suppose that makes sense. But yes, someone's texted me to remind me about that. Apologies.
Yes, exactly. I think that it's an interesting one, Andrew Rossendale, because you think he's Tory to his bones. His office in Romford is called Margaret Thatcher House. But clearly, there are a few things going on here. I imagine the polling in his constituency in Essex is very, very heavily Reform now, and he's probably looking towards the next election and trying to hang on to his seat and thinking that Reform is the best vehicle to do that. But really, the stuff which he's been coming out with, it really doesn't seem there's much at all at the moment between the Tories and Reform in terms of policy. He is using the excuse as the Chagos Islands and the previous government, the previous Tory government's, in his words, opening of the negotiations over that as for why he feels very bitter. But let's be honest, he stood as a Tory at the last election. He's been a Tory now for 18 months or so since the last election. So I'm not really sure why this now suddenly has come to the surface and he feels that he has to walk. Clearly, it is Nigel Farage's words last week when he said that there is now going to be essentially that May 7th ultimatem for any Tories to cross the floor.
Yeah.
And so it's now going to be interesting to see whether or not this trickle turns into a flood. But I would make the point that, in terms of genuine policy between the two parties, there is hardly anything. They're both very tough on migration now, or so they say, both talking tough on grooming gangs, both wanting to, rebuild economic trust. And there's a bit of a sort of a gap in the two-child benefit cap. But realistically, they are fishing in the same pool. Mm-hmm. The only thing which Nigel Farage really has, which Kemi Badenoch doesn't, is one, he's probably a better media performer, and let's be honest, probably one of the greatest political orators of modern times.
He absolutely connects.
Yeah, but also he doesn't have the baggage of 14 years of government, and that is, I think, at the moment his unique selling point. But the problem for him is that if he then takes on a load of Tories and becomes a sort of a dumping ground for Tory wash-ups, then he will be exposed to the fact that his party is full of people who are the architects of what he blames for 14 years of failure.
Yeah.
And so that is, I think, the danger of what Reform is becoming right now.
Jack, thank you. That's Jack Elson there, political editor of The Sun. Thank you to Steve for that message reminding me about Lee Anderson, who I'd forgotten about. Of course, he was an independent for a short time. He was chucked out of the Conservative Party and then became a Reform person. But you're absolutely right. There are 4 former Conservative MPs, Lee Anderson, Andrew Rossendale, Robert Jenrick and Danny Kruger. We're going to speak to Danny Kruger in a few minutes' time, but I want to speak to Joan in Sunderland first. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Joan, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
If Starmer has anything to say regarding Trump and Greenland, we already know the man is a hypocrite. Just think what he did how he gave the Chagos Islands away without any consultation whatsoever with the Chagosian people. Plus, there was a military base on that island, and we are paying, I think it's 35 million or 39.
It's a lot of money anyway, and that will be every year for quite a number of years. Joan, you're absolutely right. So you think he's a hypocrite in this?
He is. I mean, he, Herman, and quite a few of his mates, they worship at the altar of the ECHR. They'll defend anybody. What about the human rights of the Chagosian people, or do they not have any?
It's a very fair point, Joan. So you think that, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but presumably you're on Donald Trump's side when it comes to Greenland. What do you think about that?
Well, I think Donald Trump is trying as hard as it can to get the West and NATO countries to wake up and smell the coffee. They're just sleepwalking. It's like when he asks them to increase the military budget. Why should America be picking up the pieces while the Europeans they're just sleepwalking the situations? They won't do anything about migrants. They do absolutely nothing. And it's his way of asking them, come on, wake up. You're giving your continent to be absolutely taken over. But they're too stupid to realise.
OK, Joan, listen, thanks for your points. Appreciate them. That was Joan in Sunderland there. Lots of messages coming in, including from Tracy in Wakefield, who says, Peter, why should we expect America to protect us for free? Trump doesn't trust snivelling Starmer and the European lefties. Starmer giving security away to China daily, Chagos Islands, a super embassy in London with rooms he kept secret away from the public, next to the most important computer lines we have. That's the Chinese, of course, doing that rather than Keir Starmer. Russia and China in the waters just off Greenland. When he called out NATO on this, what did we do? We sent one soldier. David from Beaconsfield says, how about threatening Trump to take over his golf courses in the UK for national security purposes in retaliation? Great show, says David. That would be next level as a power play. Edward says, Trump is a businessman, not a politician. He gets his deals across the line by charging in like a bull, creating chaos and scaring other leaders except Putin and Xi Jinping. He then offers a friendly hand and gets what he wants. Perhaps it would be better if King Charles deals with Trump, not Starmer. Perhaps let him play with the crown jewels for a while, says Edward. Novel ideas here. Neil says, how about the thought that Nigel always wanted to be head of the Conservative Party? He seems to be getting his wish. John in Belfast says, when talking, Tobias Ellwood, past Defence Select Committee Chair while in office, what positive things he did to grow and increase our armed forces. We now know the Conservatives hollowed out the armed forces. He has no credibility, says John in Belfast. Terry in Birmingham says, Starmer must be loving this about Greenland. It's distracting from the problems on our own doorstep. Get back on them. There's naught we can do if Trump jumps, but he won't. Well, Terry, we are talking domestic policy. Danny Kruger's going to join us in a second from Reform UK. He's one of the 4 Conservatives who has defected. Sean says, I believe the senior military staff in America would refuse to carry out Trump's orders if he ordered to take Greenland by military force. Very, very interesting thoughts there. Different thoughts, a slightly different kind of story. I think there's, we don't need to lose our minds over this. I think a lot of the coverage I've seen is pretty hysterical. He's going to invade immediately, or these tariffs are going to happen immediately. And we know that a lot of the tariffs haven't. I'll ask Danny Kruger about this in just a second. He's the MP for East Wiltshire and a Reform UK MP too. They've had a dramatic week. Robert Jenrick, of course, defecting on Thursday. We brought you the full coverage here on Talk of that. The fallout over the weekend. And then Andrew Rossendale, another Conservative MP, joining Reform UK. There's lots to talk about. Danny Kruger will be with him after the break here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Bob, who says, why doesn't Trump call out Starmer's hypocrisy, Shagos, which Trump helped by not vetoing, says Bob. Simon says the elephant in the room is Mark Carney pivoting to China and possibly followed by Starmer. Very interesting, actually, Carney talking about China and the New World Order. Amy says, regarding the US potentially giving asylum to British Jews, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the programme. This makes me ashamed of our country, the fact that Jews don't feel safer in their home country. This comes back to the government, in my view. They should be doing a lot more to make Jews feel safe. Totally agree with you, Amy, and we will be talking about that in depth later in the programme. But I want to speak to Danny Kruger now. Danny is the Member of Parliament for East Wiltshire. He's a Reform UK MP. Pretty busy few days for your party, Danny. You have not only Robert Jenrick, but now Andrew Rossendale. There are 4, including you, of your 7 MPs who are former Conservatives. Some people might worry that this kind of dilutes the Reform UK brand a little bit. Does it worry you?
Well, obviously not, but I understand the concern. The fact is, Reform is a party of the right. It's the party that I always hoped the Conservatives would be and spent 25 years wishing for it. But on the other hand, you know, this is a party that is an insurgency. We are trying to challenge for power. We've never held it before. We're led by a man who's been on the outside of politics for decades. And the energy in our party comes from people who are fed up with both main parties, all 3 main parties that have been in government in this century. And while we need to balance having some experience, and I don't think there's anything wrong with former parliamentarians standing for reform, fundamentally, what we need to be is a new force in politics. And I think joining Reform, as I've done, as Andrew and Rob have, demonstrates our understanding that the old model has failed, the old political parties have failed, and we all need now to get behind the one man who has demonstrated over many years that he has the energy and the ideas and the sort of intellectual integrity to lead our country in a new direction.
Economically, how would you describe Reform UK? On the right, populist. Kemi Badenoch, of course, the Conservative leader, described the economic policies, for example, lifting the 2-child benefit cap, for example, as Corbynism with a union flag. What would you say to that?
Well, I'm afraid that's a bit infantile. We had a tweak to the 2-child cap, which was to support lifting it for for working couples, for when both couples are working. And I think that's a good principle. In fact, our overall position is that there should be a 2-child cap for people who are living on benefits. It's right that the taxpayer shouldn't be expected to subsidise their families in that way. And we've introduced and will announce plans for significant cuts to welfare. So I'm afraid the accusation that we're somehow on the left economically and on the left on welfare is totally wrong. We've announced £9 billion of cuts that we would make, restricting welfare to British nationals, reducing the eligibility for people with mild mental health conditions. So we would need to bring spending down, borrowing down, taxes down, and we're setting out proposals for that. So economically, we're on the right. That said, though, Peter, it's important to recognise the old sort of recipe of just tax cuts and free trade that boosted growth in the 1980s is not appropriate in an age when China exploits world trade rules to dump its products on the West. So we do need to have a more protectionist attitude to China in particular, and I recognise that that's the way the world now is. We also need to bring back our own industrial base and support industry across the United Kingdom, and that requires some more specific industrial strategy. So it's not as simple as just saying we want to deregulate and cut taxes, but we do want to do those things, but we also want to support our own industries. And that economic balance is a difficult one to strike, but it's the challenge that we've set ourselves, and we're setting out plans for how to do that in the months ahead.
You mentioned the economic aspect of this when it comes to China and other countries. I just wonder what your thoughts are on the Greenland situation, especially in regard to what Keir Starmer said this morning. Would Reform UK do things differently, especially when it comes to the threat, anyway, of tariffs from Donald Trump, which would have a serious, which, if imposed, would prove seriously problematic for your economic plan as well as any other government's economic plan?
Well, clearly, it would be very harmful if the US introduced further tariffs on UK exports. So I very much hope that isn't what happens. I think it's the wrong approach that the president is taking. It's the wrong way to deal with allies, and I very much hope it doesn't happen. But equally, it would be wrong for what the Europeans are proposing. I'm very glad we're out of the EU so that we are not complicit in this threat of blocking access to the European market for American exports. I mean, that's a trade war we really don't need, and I hope the UK doesn't go down that road either. What's clearly happening is that the president is doing what he always does, which is to call our attention to a very real omission on the part of Europe and, I'm afraid, the United Kingdom over many years, in this case to ensure the security of Greenland, which is a vital strategic site for our continent and for the Western Hemisphere. Also, of course, has many very valuable minerals which the West needs. And the important thing is that the West continues to exercise security and sovereignty over that island, and rather than letting Russia or China do so. So in a sense, I think we should welcome the attention he is calling to this challenge. The answer to that is not to retaliate and to get on our high horse about sovereignty. It's necessary to say the sovereignty of Greenland should be in the hands of Greenlanders. Same, by the way, applies to the Chagos Islands, which is an important interesting parallel with this instance.
Certainly, when it comes to self-determination and the rights of the people there are certainly allegations of hypocrisy against Keir Starmer. Do you think if Keir Starmer, the next time he meets Donald Trump face to face, he can bring this up? It'll make any difference?
I don't think Keir Starmer has a great deal of leverage over President Trump. I mean, I think he's right. I'm glad he's not behaving in the sort of childish way that President Macron is, and he recognises that what's going on here is a negotiation in sort of Trump style. But I fear that we know what side Starmer's heart is on. His heart is with Europe. It's with the sort of global anti-American alliance. He's of necessity, because Britain is so integrated into the Atlantic alliance and into the United States. He's played a more cautious game, and he has been careful not to antagonise the president. But as we've seen here, so much for the special relationship. I think what we've seen overall, and it goes beyond Starmer, I'm afraid it goes back decades of failure on the part of the United Kingdom to maintain a capacity in the defence sphere that means that we are taken seriously when it comes to these strategic issues. We're simply not acting like the great power we should be. So what we should be doing in this instance is offering meaningfully to help secure the safety of Greenland from Russian and Chinese threats, sending one unarmed naval officer to Greenland, and then having the result being a 10% tariff being stuck on us is possibly the worst instance of statecraft I can remember. It reflects our profound failure to invest meaningfully in defence over many decades, that we're just not taken seriously when we say, as we should be saying, that the future of Greenland should be for the Greenland people, but that we in Europe should be helping to defend it.
You have said that, I am taking this point, but just bear with me. You've said that on Tuesday you may well be announcing a Labour defection. Also, Nigel Farage says that after the 7th of May he will take no more defections from the Conservatives or elsewhere. Will that be the appropriate point for him to say, right, we want to be the next government of this country in Reform UK, therefore this person is going to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer if I'm Prime Minister, this person is going to be the Foreign Secretary? Because if you're outlining these plans and you have various people, including unelected people, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that per se, but you have Zia Youssef, for example, a very influential person within Reform UK, not criticising him, but simply saying, you know, he's not an MP and he's coming out on one of your main spokespeople. I just wonder, at what point would it be appropriate for Nigel Farage to outline who his senior spokespeople are on those particular issues?
Well, he's indicated that will happen fairly soon, and we'll see whether it's before or after May the 7th, which of course are local elections. They're not directly relevant to national policy. But yes, I mean, I totally take your point, and I recognise that as we approach government, the obligation will be on us to show who it is that we intend to take up different departmental responsibilities, who is going to be leading on different policy areas. And that's something we'll have to do. I mean, we do have, in a sense, the luxury of being a small party in the House of Commons, that we don't have to shadow every government, every ministerial responsibility, stand at the dispatch box, respond to questions and so on. So we don't have to, but I think you're right that it will be required. It'll be in due course, it will become necessary to do that. And we'll just wait and see for Nigel to decide when that is.
You've been very critical of your former party and what it has done. You were a very senior person in Number 10. You were the political secretary to Boris Johnson. Do you accept any responsibility for the problems with the Boris wave, for example?
Well, I was in Number 10 in the momentary, the moment of glory when we got Brexit through a recalcitrant House of Commons and European Union. So I was his political secretary before the 2019 election. So for those 4 turbulent months, if you remember, when we had a minority government. And I'm very proud of Boris, actually, for what was done in those months, having the courage, the conviction, the strategic...
Did he let you down afterwards?
Yes, I'm afraid so. I mean, I was then elected in 2019, huge hope and optimism, big majority, and we thought we were going to do the plan, which was get Brexit done, get that out of the way, and then actually do what Brexit was for, which was to reboot Britain, get the British system to work. And I'm afraid that didn't happen, partly because of COVID, but I'm afraid to say fundamentally you've got to blame the Prime Minister of the time for failing.
We'll have to leave it there for reasons of time, Danny, but listen, thank you very much indeed for joining me on Talk Drive. Lots more to discuss. We'll get your views on what Danny Kruger said soon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, it's just gone 5 o'clock. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's a lot to talk about, including about Greenland. We're also talking about whether Jews could go to America, whether they should be given asylum there. That's something that Donald Trump's personal lawyer has said should happen. We'll talk about police in Britain's first Big Brother town, catching criminals every 34 minutes using facial recognition cameras. What do you think about that? Are they a good thing because they catch criminals, or a bad thing because of the surveillance state? We'll talk as well about the sport this hour, and we'll talk to your former interim US ambassador to the UK as well about Greenland and where Trump is and where Starmer is in all of this, and what tariffs could actually mean for you and me too. Loads of people getting in touch. And indeed, thank you to the viewer who made me aware of a story about holiday makers missing a flight to Spain because a Jet2 flight took off without more than 30 passengers on board after they took a wrong turn down a set of stairs at the boarding gate. We'll talk about that in just a second too. So much to discuss between now and 7 o'clock, and I want your views on all of it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute please. We'll get some of those on the air. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Greenland seems to be the big issue people want to talk about today, but whatever it is, you let me know. 0344 499 1000. So much to talk about here on Talk Drive. Yeah, that flight taking off for Spain, taking off without more than 30 passengers on board. They took a wrong turn down a set of stairs at the boarding gate. It was a flight from Manchester to Alicante, departing without 31 holidaymakers who found themselves in a dead-end stairwell after showing staff their boarding pass as the passengers left behind had gone through a set of doors down the steps at Manchester's Terminal 2 instead of following the air bridge to the plane for the 7 o'clock flight this morning. Jet2 said it was investigating the incident as a matter of urgency. The airline apologised to the customers and said it had arranged alternative flights to Alicante for them. You would think you would notice 31 people not on board who had checked in, but apparently that had happened. Maybe you've left someone behind before. We remember David Cameron left his daughter behind in the pub. Maybe you've done that too. Let me know your stories about that. 0344 499 1000. Something perhaps a bit lighter, although I'm sure it doesn't feel too amusing for those people who were missed by Jet2. Certainly on the most serious story of the day, it's about Greenland. Starmer says that Trump's Greenland threat is completely wrong. He's played down retaliatory tariffs. Trump has threatened those. We know he threatens those fairly often, and they often haven't followed through on them. Earlier today, in fact this morning at Downing Street, Starmer spoke about the situation with America as he addressed the nation. This is what he said.
Alliances endure because they're built on respect and partnership, not pressure. That is why I said the use of tariffs against allies is completely wrong. It is not the right way to resolve differences within an alliance. Nor is it helpful to frame efforts to strengthen Greenland's security as a justification for economic pressure. Such measures hurt British workers, British businesses, and the British economy.
Well, David Hennig is the UK Director of the European Centre for International Political Economy. David, what on earth is going on here? What do you think will happen and how it will affect people in the UK? Is this actually something we need to worry about, David?
Well, as you said earlier, we've been around this rodeo a few times before with tariffs. Trump does use tariff threats an awful lot. He's both serious, but he's also quite often prepared to make deals, climb down, change his mind, wait till the markets tell him otherwise. So I think look, businesses are having to take this seriously because they may be facing 10 and 25% tariffs on top of what they're paying already.
Yes.
I suspect there's at least an evens chance this never happens. Other things happen. He gets talked round. But while it's still in prospect, everybody has to run around and try to talk him out of it. That's the game we have to play, I'm afraid. So the leaders have to take it seriously. Businesses have to take it seriously. The rest of us, just have to hope that they do their jobs and this doesn't come to pass.
And certainly, is it actually that surprising that Donald Trump in his current mode wants to take over further territory? This has happened throughout history. The US has done it, the UK has done it. We're in a situation where we're giving up the Chagos Islands, for example. Is it that shocking, really? Because a lot of people seem to be treating it, and much of the media seems to be treating it, as if this is the most ridiculous, outrageous, unprecedented thing that has ever happened.
Well, it's pretty unprecedented in modern times, and particularly with regard to your own allies, and not with consulting anybody. So
Sure.
I think it's the nature of the way that this is transpiring, and it's the nature of the fact that, you know, Trump claims, we've been doing this for ages. Lots of Republicans saying, no, we've been thinking about this for ages. They had a national security strategy a month or two ago, didn't even mention Greenland. So I think it's partly the way that Trump just sort of bounces from one topic to another. It's like sort of, playing a pinball machine, trying to work out where he's going to land next. And then we're told that this is the most important thing ever. And it's the way he does all of this that is really causes trouble to the leaders, to governments, to businesses trying to plan around it. Sure, these sorts of things have happened before, but it's honestly so exhausting. We thought maybe we'd have a few months quieter after last year's tariff madness. It appears that's not to be.
Thank you, David. David Hennig there, who's the UK director of the European Centre for International Political Economy and a trade expert. Simon Diggins is with us, Colonel Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst. Simon, I'll ask you much the same question. Do we need to be worried about this? We certainly do from a trade perspective if these tariffs are imposed, but we know time and time again Donald Trump threatens tariffs and then doesn't impose them.
I think we do, Peter. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
I think the real problem we've got is inconsistency and lack of clarity about what he's trying to do. At the same time, we've had other things going on. He's talked about what we all thought was the Gaza Peace Board turning into something that might even look like the replacement of the United Nations, with Putin and Lukashenko from Belarus being invited to join it. And I think it's this general disruption of all the things that we've been used to and that part of the stability and security architecture we've had nearly for the last 80 years that is so destabilising. It's not that things don't need to change, and it's not that some of the stuff is not working properly. And I think that's the challenge we've all got with President Trump. Sometimes the things he picks on, he's absolutely right to pick on them, but the way he goes about it and the manner it happens, it's partly we accept it as his approach, but it has a sort of destabilising effect when there are bigger things going on. And I think the challenge we've got in Europe, particularly at the moment, is the big issue on our doorsteps is what's happening in Ukraine.
Yeah.
President Putin has raised these extraordinary levels of missile attacks that have a devastating effect on Ukraine's energy and in the middle of a really harsh winter, therefore the ability to keep people warm. And at the same time, Donald Trump basically threatening to drive a coach and horses through the NATO alliance. And I think that's the challenge we've got. It's this kind of it's this very sort of random down one track 1 minute and then switching across the other track and not seeing there's a linkage between the two things.
And how does Starmer and the rest of the NATO alliance react to that? Because of course America is the biggest player, the most important player within NATO, but if you have, as Tobias Ellwood said an hour ago, an American president, in his view anyway, who doesn't kind of appreciate and welcome those international institutions, well, what do we then do? Actually, Simon, just hold on 1 second. Sorry, we've got some breaking news here. And that's the retired Chief Constable Craig Guilford of West Midlands Police. He's been referred to the police watchdog by West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner Simon Foster over the decision to ban Maccabi Tel Aviv football fans from attending a match against Aston Villa last November. That is very, very interesting. He allowed him to retire last week, Simon Foster did, the Police and Crime Commissioner, but now he has referred Craig Guilford to the police watchdog. I would imagine that's the IOPC. We'll bring you more on that at a later point in the programme. Another piece of breaking news is that the fashion designer Valentino has died at the age of 93. That is the breaking news coming out today. And I think I might have a bit more on West Midlands in just a second. It's just being brought to me. But certainly we know that no, that's all we have for the moment. Craig Guilford referred to the police watchdog by the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner. Simon, apologies to interrupt you mid-flow, but I hope you'll agree it was important to get those two little bits of breaking news out to our viewers and listeners. So, what do you make of the role of NATO and the fact and Starmer's reaction essentially to what President Trump has done?
I think Prime Minister Starmer's got a very difficult job at the moment. I'm not a fan of him, but I think he has, in this particular instance, got a very difficult role. He's trying to keep President Trump on side. He worked very hard to try and ensure that when the initial wave of tariffs that came when President Trump arrived were not imposed directly on Britain. And he's absolutely clear about the requirement for Britain and its security to maintain the NATO alliance. But what he's not doing is recognising we are now in a different world. And the different world means that we need to be more defence-wise, strategically more autonomous, and work with our European allies. We can no longer rely on the Americans to be the kind of backstop for everything we want to try and do. Indeed, we may not be able to rely on the Americans at all. In which case, where is the recognition of that? Are we still talking about 2.5% of our GDP in spend security by 2027, or are we actually going to do something like the Poles have done and near double their spend on defence? Because that's where we are. We're in a different world order. And what I'm not hearing at all from at the moment, I recognise his difficulties. I absolutely get his difficulties. What I'm not hearing, therefore, is what are we doing about it? And people talk all this time about talk softly and carry a big stick. Well, we're not doing that. We're doing all the talking, but we're not carrying a stick at all. And that's the challenge we've got. And that's what I think Prime Minister Starmer needs to do. He needs to change the way in which we look at security and think, how do we make this happen by ourselves and with those people that we can work with? Because at the moment, I fear we may not be able to rely on the Americans, and that's a real challenge for us.
Can I ask you about another major issue of foreign policy? One I think is actually being neglected by a lot of people. I know we disagree on the Shamima Begum issue, but and she may, in theory, be released in a few days. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. But really, I want you to bring us up to date with what's going on in Syria, the fact that there was meant to be a ceasefire between the new regime and the rebels. Tell us your thoughts on this and where we are.
Well, I think what we're seeing at the moment is this kind of the slow redevelopment of Syria as one country. In the latter years of Assad particularly, basically it broke down into various regional areas. So the Kurds were able to control the area in the northeast. There are various rebel groups against President Assad. Government forces had a limited control, and there were Turkish-inspired militias also operating in the country. Now, what the new president's been able to do is actually gradually control more and more of the country. And what happened in the northeast, particularly with the SDF, which is the group that they've had this ceasefire on, he appears to have developed a ceasefire with them. Elements of that ceasefire are starting to break down, but a bit like the ceasefire in Gaza, my suspicion is it's going to hold, and there will be this gradual incorporation of those northeastern territories back into Syria proper from there, and they will have one government for the whole of the country, albeit with an element of kind of autonomy, local autonomy within the country, which is sort of what happened anyway. So I think that's where we're going to be, and it has consequences. The consequences you raised is that the SDF will have to hand over the camps where they've been holding some of the ISIS rebels, and it also changes the slight balance of power between the Kurds and their relationship with Turkey and the relationship with Iraq as well. So there's a few more things to play out with this because it's a very complex and very complicated part of the world. But I think the ceasefire will hold, albeit, I say, with every so often the odd eruption and everything goes with it, and we're going to have to deal with the consequences again.
Simon, as always, thank you. That's Simon Diggins there, the military and defence analyst. And those two bits of breaking news. The first one is that the retired Chief Constable Craig Guilford of West Midlands Police, he shamefully was allowed to retire on Friday. He has been referred to the police watchdog by the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner Simon Foster over the decision to ban Maccabi Tel Aviv football fans from attending a match against Aston Villa last November. We'll be talking to Chris Hobbs, actually, former police officer, in just a few seconds about the Big Brother town and the facial recognition cameras, so perhaps we can ask him about that breaking news. Also, the Italian fashion designer Valentino has died. He was 93. Valentino Garavani passed away today at his Roman residence, surrounded by his loved ones, according to the foundation. Ashley is in Dorset and has some thoughts on Greenland. Ashley, you're very welcome to the programme. Thanks for ringing 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Good evening.
Hi there.
When you look at Donald Trump, he is a bull in a china shop. He's New York through and through. He's brash. He's out there, and it throws people off their game.
Yeah,
but actually,
can't disagree with that.
Yeah, but when you actually look at what he's doing around the world, it's actually very logical. You know, Venezuela, how he handled Iran, etc. And Greenland's no different.
Look at the Middle East. He basically helped bring peace to the Middle East, and you know, he has said that he should have won the Nobel Peace Prize for that. I think it was maybe a bit soon, but certainly he appears to be a peacemaker. He doesn't want to invade Venezuela and cause all sorts of mayhem there, but he does seem to be doing a lot more military action, military strikes, certainly than his first term, actually.
Definitely, and it's precise strikes. It's not long drawn out wars. It's quick hit and let me affect some change. But as one of your callers said earlier, you know, he's looking 10, 20, 30 years ahead here. American history, if you look at it, Greenland's been very important for a long time. And if you're an American at the moment looking at Europe, what do you see when you look across the pond? Because all we see is weakness here. We have no leadership in Europe. You know, we've got national governments fighting with European Union governments. We have oil and gas under our feet here, which we refuse to touch because of our green policies. So we're buying oil and gas via proxy from Russia. So funding a war which we're supposed to be on the other side of. We have Chinese interests all over the place. They don't need boots on the ground. They basically own the country.
Yeah.
You know, and the same thing's happening. So if you're looking at Europe and you're going, we're going to invest billions of pounds and we're going to put our soldiers there to help defend. At what point do you go, hang on a minute, is this really the best idea? Because in 10, 20 years' time, is that really going to be the same country that we went and fought for in the 40s?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what they're looking at the moment.
It's a very fair point. Ashley, sorry, did you have a final point there, Ashley?
No, I was going to say we are just completely weak. We have no leadership. If we did have strong leadership, somebody could pick up the phone to Donald Trump and say, this is the UK, we're outside the EU. Until we put down the phone, we're going to make a deal with ourselves here. How do we get ourselves out of this and move forward? And nobody's able to do that.
Ashley, thank you for that. I appreciate that. That's Ashley there in Dorset. John from Middlesbrough says, remember one Conservative Generic joined Reform on the same day as 1,000 new members signed up. I don't class that as Conservatives 2.0. Andrew in Salisbury says, does Danny Kruger now regret leaving the Tories for Reform now that Reform has become the Tories 2.0? And Nigel Farage is looking and sounding like Boris Johnson. Is he, Andrew? I'm not sure I agree with that. On the holidaymakers and Jet 2 and the flight, the stairs mix-up, meaning 31 people were left behind. Nicola says, I hope those passengers left behind only had hand luggage, as otherwise it's a massive security risk. I can only assume they didn't want to miss their departure slot, as they will have known they were checked in and their head count was less. Yeah, well, what have you left behind? I'd love to hear some of your stories. One person's got in touch and said, my dad once left our dog tied up at the local shop. A former colleague left his child in a changing room at a swimming pool. He drove 3 other kids home and then realised number 4 wasn't there. Have you done that? Have you been that? I remember there was a classic one. The pastor at our local, or the minister I should say, at our local church in Northern Ireland, he was very elaborately putting on this kind of papoose, this baby carrier thing. He was putting it all on and he said, there's something missing. It's really elaborate and all these straps and strapping them in and clicking them in, all the rest. Went, oh yes, I forgot to put the baby in the carrier, which I found rather amusing. Lots to discuss, including this breaking news about Craig Guilford, referred to the police watchdog. We'll talk to Chris Hobbs, who conveniently is coming up in just a second to talk about that, but also the Big Brother town. 34 minutes, every 34 minutes, a criminal is caught in Croydon because of facial recognition technology. Is that something we should welcome elsewhere? Let me know your thoughts on that and everything else we're talking about today. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Terry in Birmingham's made a very good point. He says Churchill flip-flopped between the Tories and Liberals, just saying. Sean says that Police and Crime Commissioner is now in self-preservation mode. Now he let his friend retire instead of sacking him. Job-saving time for him. It'll be very interesting to talk about what Simon Foster, the Police and Crime Commissioner, has done in regard to Craig Guilford. We'll do that in a second. We're also talking about things you've left behind. And Mark in Croydon says, I've just realised I've left my stinking wet gym kit in the changing room at work. God help whoever finds it. I dread getting it tomorrow. Yes, there are lots of those stories come in, so keep them coming in. Text them 87222. Tad in Cambridge also says, on facial recognition that we're going to talk about in a second with Chris Hobbs. Evening, Peter. Facial recognition could be an asset in the fight against crime, but wouldn't work in every case. For instance, Starmer has so many different faces, police officers will have to load every one of them into the system to register a positive hit, says Tad. I see what you're doing there, Tad. Very good. Chris Hobbs is a former police officer and has joined us to talk about facial recognition. We'll do that in a second, Chris, but I just want to talk to you first about this breaking news that Craig Guilford, the retired Chief Constable of West Midlands, who acted absolutely shamefully in regard to the Maccabi Tel Aviv football match, he's been referred to the police watchdog, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, by the Police and Crime Commissioner, Simon Foster, who said he had acted with honour last week. What's going on here, do you think, Chris?
That's a very good question. To be quite honest, based on what I've sort of delved to find out, I've got a little bit of sympathy for him because he's Chief Constable. So he, for stuff like intelligence reports, threat assessments, risk assessments, he's very much dependent on the units. For example, the football intelligence unit that they will have at Aston Villa, the football liaison officer, to provide him with accurate intelligence.
But the buck stops with him, does it not? And he lied to Parliament. I mean, yeah, I have no sympathy for him whatsoever.
Yeah, no, you're right, because it's like if at the end of the day, the buck does stop with him. And it's people under his command who failed, without doubt, failed him. And you're right, I don't think he should hold on to his job. But at the same time, as I say, I've got a little bit of... He cannot be expected to look over every little bit of paper.
But he oversaw it, and he gave that evidence to Parliament, and he must... You know, if I was giving evidence to Parliament, I'd check every single thing was correct. But I think perhaps what you're indicating is the wider issue here is that it's not one man. It's not one person. And even though he's now retired, this isn't the end of the matter, is it?
No, it's not. And he's going to be subject to an investigation. And rightly so. I think the IOPC will investigate it, will get to the bottom of it, how culpable he is, whether he needs to be in some way, shape or form punished. Theoretically, he could lose his pension. Ultimately, he could even possibly maybe face some sort of criminal charge. But it's obviously a difficult time for him. But yeah, it needs to be explored. How culpable is he, and how culpable really are the rest of the officers serving under him, who frankly have badly let him down?
Yes, indeed, and there's an Assistant Chief Constable, I think his name's Simon O'Hare, if I remember correctly, who was overseeing that as well. Lots to think about in that. We'll continue covering that breaking news throughout the programme on Talk Drive between now and 7. What we actually got you on to talk about, Chris, was, of course, Croydon, Britain's first Big Brother town. They're catching criminals every 34 minutes using facial recognition cameras, including one who's been on the run apparently for 20 years. What do you make of this?
Well, it's a result. It's a very, very good result. Croydon, I must admit, Croydon isn't my favourite place, but to get those number of people off the streets, I think, is an achievement. Obviously, there are concerns. I do know someone who's actually been with those enforcement cameras. He's actually been with police officers to see how the whole thing works. He's very, very impressed by it. And at the end of the day, occasionally it might get something wrong. But what happens is the officers approach the person, have a quick chat, satisfy that, no, it's not him or her, and let the person go on their way. It's all done in a very friendly sort of way.
And is it done instantly? So you have officers covering this instantly, or do they get back to the person, or how does it actually work? If someone's spotted on facial recognition, do the police officers deploy immediately?
Yes, yeah. There are police officers whose work for the day, as it were, will be with the cameras and the operators. So as soon as they get notified someone has triggered an alert, then they will go and speak to that person and assess whether it is him or her and what then needs to be done. The other interesting thing, it's not just people who are wanted for specific offences. Apparently it also throws up a considerable number of sex offenders. And again, the officers, if it is a sex offender, they may not be wanted. What are they doing in that area? The officer will go and have a quick chat with them. And obviously, to a certain extent, if they were thinking of offending again, that's going to be a little bit of a deterrent, and it's good intelligence.
I wonder about the rollout of this, because if you're in Croydon is a high crime area. It's an area of South London where there is a lot of crime. That is a fact. If it's done in a high crime area on a busy street, for example, you're going to see thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people pounding those streets, walking along for whatever reason, out and about every day. So you will get sort of positives there. But if it's rolled out to, I mean, it's pretty resource intensive as well, presumably, for police officers to have to watch it and to see what the facial recognition cameras bring up. So that's fine if it's in a heavy area, like a heavily populated area and a heavy crime area like Croydon. But how realistic is it to actually roll this out nationally or across London or across Manchester or whatever?
Yeah, I think that's all something that's got to be looked at. Obviously, the big cities will be where it's rolled out initially. How you manage the smaller towns, the villages, or do you really need them there? Are they low crime areas? Obviously, the priority has to be a high crime area in a busy city, in shopping centres and so on, because you want to catch the maximum number of criminals you can. But as it gets more sophisticated, there may well be a case for putting cameras in towns and villages. Obviously, the response won't be quickly, but if that goes to the control room...
that's the point, isn't it? If you have a facial recognition camera that has one person in a small town and says, right, this man or woman's a wrong un, will the response actually get them in time that they're on that street? And Ernie's been in touch about this on text and says what a waste of time facial recognition is. So they see the criminals, then there's no police to apprehend them, there's no courts to deal with them, there's no prison places. It's just another farce, says Ernie. I mean, he's got a point if it's an area where the response isn't as fast as it would be in Croydon, for example, that those resources aren't specifically there.
I think that's the same for any crime, to be quite honest. Even if it's a burglary that's actually going on, suspects on premises, for example, you're still going to get a lesser response possibly in a rural area than you're going to get in a big city. I think that's a fact of life. Okay. I think what has to be measured is whether is it worth it to install that in a small town or village. And I think ultimately, as it gets more sophisticated, the answer will be yes. And even if an officer doesn't get there, that's still useful intelligence that person is in that particular area.
Chris, thank you. That's Chris Hobbs there, who's a former police officer. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme. What do you think about this, of facial recognition? It's very, very interesting. 0344 499 1000. One person says, good to see facial recognition seems to be working. What about burqas and face masks? Surely, to be fair, face coverings should be banned. That's certainly Layla Cunningham, who is the Reform UK candidate for Mayor of London. She wants those face coverings banned. Matt says, to have such an effective oversight is surely a wonderful thing, but it will come at a cost. As Newton pointed out, the issues with oversight always depend on the overseers. Well, lots more to come on this. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We'll be speaking to the Liberal Democrats in just a second. Edward Morello is there, a member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee on Greenland. We'll also get your calls, text, tweets and voice notes as well. Send your voice notes in 0344 499 1000 and get the sport as well before 6 o'clock. So it's all happening here on Talk Drive. Stay with us.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Brett on Twitter. He has tweeted me to say Trump cares for the country he was voted to run. That's exactly what every president, prime minister, royal and whatever other leader should be doing, but they don't, as they aren't in it for the people they're meant to serve. They're all traitorous scum, especially Keir Starmer. Well, I don't think it's nice to call people traitors or scum, to be brutally honest, but that's what Brett thinks. Pete says, evening Peter Cardwell, MPs flitting to Reform UK. What else are Reform UK meant to do when there are no elections until May? It's absolutely rubbish, this claim that there are Tories Mark II. These defections will happen and change will only happen at the elections. Joe says the wet Liberal Elwood was one of the reasons the Tories got smashed. And on leaving things behind, the happy hammer, Andy, says the player manager of our football team showered and left an away game, leaving his 11-year-old son behind. Obviously, we took the lad back with us. When he walked into the clubhouse, the dad was sitting happily with a pint, completely oblivious. And just a final one before we go to our next guest. Zen Master 2 says, why should Trump care about Europe? They have always hated him. They call him every name out of the sun. They show him no respect, and they mug off America with the NATO spending. Well, let's find out what the Liberal Democrats think. Edward Morello is the MP for West Dorset. He joins me now as a member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Edward, good evening to you.
Good evening.
What do you think of what President Trump is saying about Greenland? Because we've heard a lot of this before. We've heard threats of military action. We've heard threats of tariffs, for example, which could have a disastrous effect for our economy, but often he hasn't followed through. So what do you think is true, and what do you think we should really actually be worried about here, if anything?
Well, I think we have also seen Donald Trump follow through on some of his threats as well.
That's
so
true.
tariffs
Yep.
have been
That's true.
And obviously we did also see a significant military intervention in Venezuela. So I think one does have to err on the side of caution. I accept the premise that Donald Trump is full of a lot of bluster, but unfortunately what we have seen, especially in this most recent presidency, is a willingness to go much further than we've seen in his previous incumbency in the White House. And so for that reason, I think anything he says should be taken at face value, and ultimately you do need to prepare for the eventuality that he may in fact be speaking the truth.
So how should we prepare for that, and how should we react to him? We heard from the Prime Minister this morning, stronger words than we're used to from the Prime Minister, but for many of my viewers and listeners, not strong enough.
Well, I agree with your viewers. The fact is that if we were looking at the behavior of any other country, I mean, if you take the words United States of America out of the situation, and you saw another country where you had the leader of that country talking about extending their time in office beyond their democratic mandate, possibility of suspending midterm elections, you have what is effectively a secret police on the streets abducting and disappearing people, and one might argue committing extrajudicial killings, and also threatening the sovereign territorial integrity of a neighbour, I think we would be speaking about that country or that leader in much stronger terms.
Well, what would you call Donald Trump? Do you think he's a dictator, Edward?
I'm not saying he's a dictator. What I'm saying is that if you look at the behaviour that Donald Trump is exhibiting and the things that he is saying, I think in any other country, if it was an autocracy, if it was a dictatorship, we would be expecting much stronger language and much firmer action from our government.
And I see that point, but the fact is it's not. It's our closest ally. It's the United States. So how should we deal with them? How can we be a critical friend if that's what you think we should be?
And that is exactly the problem that the Prime Minister finds himself in, because, of course, this government has put a lot of weight on the possibility of signing a trade deal with the US, and the government is therefore trying to walk a fine line between securing a trade deal, continuing support for Ukraine, while also acting in the best interests of our European and our NATO allies. And I appreciate that puts the Prime Minister in a bind trying to square that circle. But I do think that, ultimately, NATO is based on the premise of Article 5, which is an attack against one is an attack against all. I don't know how you can continue to hold true the integrity of NATO if you have a situation where one member is threatening to invade another.
So what should happen? What's the ideal scenario in all of this? Because you've diagnosed the problem, I think, very adeptly there. You've told us what you are clear on what the problem is, but how do we solve it? What would the Liberal Democrats do?
Well, I think standing firmly with our European allies is an important first step. You have seen the EU looking at the full range of responses that they might bring to bear.
That just gets us into a trade war, Edward, doesn't it?
Well, respectfully, we could be in a trade war whether we like it or not. If in fact Donald Trump follows through on his 10% tariffs, which by the way is just the first tariff he's talking about instigating. He's talking about more later in the year if he doesn't get handed Greenland. So, I mean, we could very well find ourselves in that trade war whether we want to or not. Actually having a proportional response, working with our allies so that that has the greatest effect, is probably the greatest deterrent that we could bring to bear against the possibility of that. And it would be a quid pro quo. If you strike first, then we would follow up with our tariffs. I think dramatically increasing our contribution to the Joint Expeditionary Force and standing with our allies militarily as well, strengthening our position in the Arctic and in the High North, and ensuring that we are fully committed to fulfilling our obligations around that space and the Greenland-Iceland gap would go some way, hopefully, to alleviating some of the President's concerns around the security in the Arctic and the High North. But I do think you need to prepare to have the full arsenal of responses available to you, and trying to walk that fine line where there is no stick, there is only carrot, I'm not sure really works with bully boy politicians like the President.
Edward, you are on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. You will know, of course, that there are lots of foreign affairs issues around at the moment. I just wonder, in regard to Iran, a big issue that a lot of people are very, very invested upon. Why is it, do you think, that there have been so many people, particularly on the left, who've been so vociferous about the Palestinian people, and they have every right to be if they want to be worried about them. I certainly want Palestine to be free from Hamas. Yet there doesn't seem to be as much support for the Iranian people who are dealing with a brutal dictatorship, murdering, abducting, sexual crimes used as a weapon of war, similar things. There just doesn't seem to be the same outcry about that. I wonder why you think that is.
I don't know the rationale for why the response isn't as cross-party in terms of the response. I think it is a shame. And again, Iran has been historically a massive destabilizing force in the Middle East. And when you look at, what happened in Iraq, where, Iranian proxies funded and in some cases led by IRGC members were attacking British troops, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that this regime is an enemy of the United Kingdom. And we do need to make sure that we are supporting those people who are looking for a true...
How do we best support them? Because, again, coming back to Donald Trump has talked about, help is on the way. It doesn't seem to be. He's hinted there may be military action. What should we do in this country to support those people? It's got to be more than thoughts and prayers.
Oh, well, I agree. And I think, we have been very active in the United Kingdom in sanctioning the Iranian Revolution, key IRGC members. They've been put on what's called the FIRS, Enhanced FIRS list, because we have seen them acting malignly in the UK and against Iranian dissidents in the United Kingdom as well. They are a huge threat. They are a exporter of terrorism, as we've seen through their proxies in places like Yemen and in Gaza. And so it is absolutely right that we do absolutely everything we can to bring around the firmest sanction regime possible to starve this government, this theocratic government, of any resource at all, and then support those opposition groups that are looking for a transition to a more democratic and representative government.
And just one other matter before you go. I'm sure you will have seen over the weekend that Syria, there was a ceasefire agreement between the government and the rebels. I just wonder how stable you think Syria is, especially when we look at people like Shamima Begum, who may well, some report anyway, come back to the UK in a few days' time. I just wonder whether you think that's likely, whether you think it should happen, and what your view is on stability in the region particularly.
Well, I think Syria made an important first step. It is going through its constitutional process at the moment. The reality is what democracy looks like in Syria may not be what we would consider in Western Europe, but a transition from a repressive regime like the Assad regime to something that is more inclusive. We should be doing absolutely everything that we can to support that, and I know that the British government and the FCDO is lending support where it can in that area. The reality is that a stable Syria as broader a stable Middle East is in everyone's interest, not least to our allies in the region.
OK, thank you very much indeed. That's Edward Morello there, the Lib Dem MP for West Dorset. He's also on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. What do you think of what he said there? 0344 499 1000. Matt says the chain of command seems to be Putin thinks Trump's a fool and both think Europe is at best a collection of useful idiots. Don in Chelmsford says, hi Peter, in Orwell's 1984, people had to guard their facial expression when listening to public announcements. A negative expression or reaction led to arrest. I don't think we're quite there yet, and hopefully we never will be. Ian's in Bridgend. Let's go to Wales and talk to him. What do you think about Greenland and Trump, Ian? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hello, Peter. Thank you very much for taking my call again.
Good to talk to you.
I think it's just a matter of time now that Trump will get Greenland.
You think he's going to get it?
Oh yeah, I'm pretty certain everybody will fall into line eventually. Interesting to see what's happening in Alberta over the weekend as well. 130,000 turning out to sign up for a referendum now to secede from
I saw that actually. Yeah, it's very interesting actually that there are a lot of people in Alberta who don't want to be part of the wider Canadian Commonwealth, so it'll be very interesting to see what happens there.
It will be very interesting, yeah. They create all the mineral wealth and it's all taken by Ottawa and spent elsewhere. I think, the days of these globalist twits now like Starmer are becoming numbered, I think there is being a new world order, isn't it? We saw the BRICS countries aligning, and I think we see now aligning under Trump as well. Roll on when reform take over and we can join in the party.
Thank you, Ian. That's Ian in Bridgend there. Peter's in Sussex and has some thoughts as well. Peter, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thank you, Peter. Evening, Peter.
Evening.
I've been off today and I was listening to several, radio, yours and also GB News and the history of the Greenland. And to me, as I said to your researcher or your
colleague, your producer,
colleague, that if you think about it, this is how Trump works. He's not a politician, he's a businessman. So his first gambit is to, let's frighten him up, because for donkey's years, America have been subsidising all the military over Europe, or majority of it. And, I mean, as far as I could read, we are putting less than 2.5% of GDP from our government. Macron, a little bit more, I think, and then Germany and the rest of them. And I think in the end, Trump has said, well, enough's enough. Why should we, or the American taxpayer, pay for all this, insurance of military might when Greenland is sitting there with all the minerals?
So you can see his logic.
Yeah, because if you think about it, it's got all the minerals. I looked at the Greenland, America first got on the base in 1951. And it's 40% bigger in land shape than the United States, 40%.
Right,
but
okay.
They've only got roughly about 60,000 inhabitants on there.
Yes.
Now, for me, for the security of not only Scotland and northern part of England, and also Alaska, and Canada as well, although Canada's aligned themselves with China, which is a frightening thing.
Yes.
I wouldn't trust Carney as much as I'd throw him. But you can see Trump's thing, that the EU leaders are all playing catch-up with him, and they don't want to part with the money, and he's saying, well, no, enough's enough. Why should we subsidise? So he's saying, right, OK, what we do, I'll threaten you, I'm going to go to Greenland.
He hasn't quite made that argument, though, about the money direction. He's obviously asked them to increase their military spending, but your argument is a slight extension of what Trump's doing, isn't it, Peter?
Yeah, but the thing is we're putting 2.5% apparently, and it won't get to 3% till 2029. 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah, it's a long way away. Yeah.
And then you've got Russia on the border in Ukraine. You've got Russian ships apparently are still sailing through. I can't remember what the strait is near Greenland. You've got China. Now, if they decide to take Greenland, there's no one to stop them.
Yeah.
We can't.
Yeah.
Definitely we can't. Well, we've got one bloke on there. I mean, he could probably, make a phone call saying that Russia's invaded or China's invaded. But that's all we've got. We've got nothing. And I just think Trump, although I was listening to your Liberal thing, that they all hate Trump. You've heard all the rhetoric when he was when he was out of office.
Yeah.
They hate him. They loathe him. So no matter what he does, he could save the world, and he'll still be.
Yeah. Well, he would argue that actually he's done a lot of that, and he's brought peace to a lot of different regions, including the Middle East. Peter, listen, thank you for that. Thanks for your thoughts on that. Thanks also to Stephen Cambridge. He says, Cardi P, you should have asked your guest Edward Morello, why does Ed Davey always slag off Trump? Lib Dems don't have a clue. They will always be on the side of the European Union. Matt says it feels feels like Europe's rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Such a cliche, but it doesn't feel as if we're actually addressing things directly with any clarity on Europe, but rather appeasing. What do you think of all of that? 0344 499 1000. Lots more to discuss between now and 7 o'clock, and in just a few minutes' time, we'll get the sport too. Stay with us here on Talk Drive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much for everybody who's been in touch. There's loads of questions about Greenland coming in. We're going to return to that debate in a few minutes' time. There's so many other things to discuss, including Craig Guilford as well and West Midlands Police. But we're going to talk about the sport now. And Mike is with us, Mike Anstead, Sports Head of Content at The Sun. How are you doing? You all right?
Good, thanks, Peter.
The future of Spurs manager Thomas Frank, the talk of the weekend. Just bring us up to date whether he can survive after another loss to West Ham on Saturday.
Well, we were waiting this morning to see whether he would actually turn up at this afternoon's press conference, which he did. He turned up at training, told everyone it was sunny outside, even though it looked pretty grey and cloudy to our reporter who was there. But he's made the point today that he had sat down today and had lunch with 3 of the key Spurs execs, and his interpretation is, I've got the full backing. So, be interesting. You know, they had a pretty bad 2-1 home defeat against West Ham at the weekend. West Ham struggling in the relegation zone. That's put him under massive pressure. A lot of the fans want him out. And he's got this huge game against Borussia Dortmund tomorrow night. So another defeat. Let's see whether those execs are still going to back him, because it can't go on forever. There's a lot of Spurs fans who do want him out.
We're in the transfer window as well. Big transfer news today. Manchester City have signed an England international. Tell us about who's made the move.
Yep, so Mark Gay, this has been sort of trailed sort of since Friday when this all...
Yeah, we talked about that last week.
Yeah, when it's all sort of suddenly came to a fall, because we weren't sure whether he was going to move in the window of the summer, but Man City made the move. So, yeah, he's been unveiled this afternoon. Get the number 15 shirt. Pep really needs him because they've been struggling defensively, as the Manchester derby showed. They lost that game 2-0 and just they were run ragged all over the shop. So he won't play tomorrow in the Champions League over in Norway and Bodo, but he'll probably get thrown in the mix at the weekend when they play Wolves. Massive signing. The great player for Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace's captain. Going to be a big defender for England at the World Cup, but it's hard making a move mid-season, so we'll see whether he gets a pace straight away.
And bring us up to date with what's going on in the world of golf as well.
Yes, so golf, this is the Live PGA kind of back and forth which is going on at the moment. So we've already had Brooks Koepka move. He's back at the PGA from Live, so he's put away his Saudi money, taken a bit, slightly less money with the US PGA. But we've got Patrick Reed today, who, known as Captain America for his exploits in the Ryder Cup and everything else, one of the sort of controversial figures. He took the Live money a few years ago. He's now basically issued a come and get me please. So if the money's on the table and everything's right, I'll go. He doesn't actually fall under this returning member programme, which the PGA have sort of massaged to get back people like Koepka and DeChambeau, because he won the Masters in 2018. That falls just before. But I mean, if they can make it work, they'll find some sort of way of getting him through. But the long and short of it is there's Live members suddenly sticking their hand up to move away from the Saudi tour. So it's going to be interesting where we are in the next sort of 6 months and how many of them are going to cross. But if the Saudis lose all the big names, then is there any point in it carrying on?
No cost of Live in crisis for them. Mike, thank you very much. That's Mike Arnstead, Sports Head of Content at The Sun. I just want to tell you now about how you could win, you could be in with a chance of winning a trip of a lifetime to San Francisco. Talk is giving away flights, a 3-night stay at the 4-star Intercontinental Hotel, and £2,500 of spending money, plus tickets to the Super Bowl to top it all off. Listen now to find out how you can enter.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 22nd January 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talksport.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
So there's all the information, and if you want some more, you can go to, of course, talksport.com and get all the info. Let's hear a couple of voice notes now. Pete has been in touch on Greenland.
For me, Trump, I've lost a bit of respect for him, mate, to be honest with you. He's talking about taking over a sovereign country. Like, what's the difference between him and Putin? I actually think Trump's quite dangerous. It's like he's thrown his dummy out the pram because he didn't get the Peace Prize. So let's cause chaos instead. Anxiety provoking for a lot of people, Peter. Anyway, have a good show, mate.
Pete, thanks for your thought on that. I don't think, Donald Trump, he hasn't ruled out military action. He said no comment when asked about that by NBC earlier. I don't think he's going to go in and do what Putin has done and slaughter tens of thousands of people. First of all, there only are about 60,000 Greenlanders, and I can't see it being a military action, and hopefully it won't be the same. But taking over territory without the people's consent, well, yeah, that's what Putin's done. That's what Trump is saying he wants to do. Certainly the Chagos Islanders were not given any say on whether those islands were handed over. So perhaps Keir Starmer has, there's some element of similarity there as well. Certainly a number of our viewers and listeners seem to think so as well. Darren in South Wales says the people of Greenland are lucky that the UK doesn't own them, or two-tier Keir would have given them to China and probably given them £1 trillion on top. He's such a hypocrite. Protect Greenland, give the Chagos away, a border for Ukraine, none for us, says Darren in South Wales. Kind of making my point for me there, so thank you for that, Darren. On the Tories as well, Kelvin has been in touch with a voice note.
I think these people that are on about the defectors from the Tories, what they're forgetting is these Tories that are defecting are true Tories. They believe in the old values. They're not the wet weekends that we've got in power, all the wokey brigade. They are actual Tories that want the same as we do. And that party's not giving it us. And then look at Lisa Nandy, another idiot. I call her bucket mouth, calling Nigel Farage and everybody fascist. Well, as she looks at her own party, the things that they do, digital ID, looking in people's bank accounts, stopping elections because they know they're going to get a kicking, isn't that fascism? The sort of thing they do, isn't it? There's a lot more she needs to look at with their party, because that's what they all do.
It's a very fair point, Kelvin. Certainly, Lisa Nandy using the word fascist, I'm not sure that's helpful. I don't think it's true in regard to Reform UK. I don't think she should do that. And also, you get a lot in Labour, a lot of people in Labour saying, we need to be this kinder, gentler politics, this kind of idea that we need to be less divisive. Well, going around calling people fascists, when I don't think there's any evidence to support that with Reform UK, I just don't think that's helpful or a good thing. Dawn in Chelmsford says, we rightly discuss political issues about Greenland, but to me the natural world is also important. Greenland supports a huge range of wildlife. Evening, Peter. Winston Churchill famously stated, if Britain must choose between Europe and the open sea, she must always choose the open sea. And Mike in Cheshire says, good evening, Mike. The Trump claims Trump claims he has brought peace to many conflicts, in particular the Middle East, which isn't exactly true. The Israelis fought Hamas to a stand. Iran is still standing. There's been no real solution. It's just really a pause. Trump hasn't had to deal with anything other than minnow countries. Nothing has been solved, just postponed, says Mike in Cheshire. Well, I wouldn't really call Iran a minnow country. I wouldn't really call the Israelis a minnow country at all. I think they're a very strong country. So, Mike, I'm not sure I agree with you. And there is not a perfect peace in the Middle East, but there is some peace there, and certainly Israel and Hamas have stopped fighting each other to the degree that they were. Iran is, of course, another big issue, and I was talking to the Liberal Democrat spokesman about that a little bit earlier on, the member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Edward Morello, and it was very interesting to hear what he had to say. I will also be interested in a few minutes' time to find out what the interim US ambassador to the UK, the former one, Philip T. Reeker, thinks about all of this, because he's a former Assistant Secretary of State for Europe, a long-time career diplomat in the US Foreign Service. And I think that's going to be fascinating to hear what he has to say, as it will be to hear from Jennifer Ewing, a spokeswoman for Republicans overseas. We're also going to talk about the United States considering asylum for British Jews. That's something that Trump's personal lawyer has talked about. And we'll find out what's in the Sun tomorrow as well from John Lucas, the night news editor for them. So there's so much to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. And as always, I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's just gone 6 o'clock and there's so much to talk about this evening, not least Greenland. We're going to talk to the spokeswoman for Republicans overseas in a second, and the former interim ambassador to the UK, a long-serving diplomat in the US Foreign Service. He's going to tell us what he thinks of what Donald Trump has been saying. He says he hasn't ruled out military action. He said no comment when asked about that by NBC News a little bit earlier on this afternoon in a phone interview. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about whether he could purchase Greenland and whether we in the UK actually have any moral authority to talk about this, given our history, but also because of the Chagos Islands more recently. Those people weren't consulted about what happened to them. So we'll ask about that. What do you think about all of this? 0344 499 1000. We'll also talk about Trump's personal lawyer, who says the US is considering asylum for British Jews. Also, West Midlands Police ignored a string of hate crimes against Jews in Birmingham. We know that the former Chief Constable this evening, that breaking news about an hour ago, he has been referred to the IOPC, the Independent Office of Police Conduct. We'll find out what's happening in the Sun as well and take all your calls, text, tweets and voice notes. The ways to get in touch are as follows. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note. We had a few of those before the break on the main number. You can send me a WhatsApp text message on the main number, or you can ring me on the main number, which is of course 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. And just to let you know, I'm here on Drive between 4 and 7 all of this week. So let's get started. Lots to discuss between now and 7. Well, with such a busy news weekend, what Donald Trump has been saying, of course, people are wondering what the Prime Minister thinks. Well, he's been telling us this morning at a hastily arranged press conference and speech at 10 Downing Street. He spoke about the situation with America as he addressed the nation. This is what the Prime Minister said.
UK and the US are close allies and close partners. That relationship matters profoundly, not just to our security, but to the prosperity and the stability that people here depend upon. Under President Trump, as under previous presidents, we're determined to keep that relationship strong, constructive, and focused on results.
The Prime Minister is speaking this morning. Well, Jennifer Ewing is standing by. She's a spokeswoman for Republicans Overseas UK. Hi, Jennifer. We'll come to you in just a second. But I just want to speak to Philip T. Reeker first, who's the former interim US ambassador to the UK. He's a former Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and a long-time career diplomat in the US Foreign Service. Philip, thank you for joining me this evening. I wonder what you think is going on here and how the UK should respond.
Thanks, Peter. It's always good to join you here from Washington on what is a holiday here, the Martin Luther King birthday federal holiday. So streets a little quieter. Obviously, certainly the White House isn't focusing on Martin Luther King's birthday. The big news is the Greenland story, the letter that was circulated and released that President Trump sent to the Norwegian Prime Minister, complaining that because he had not been awarded the Nobel Prize, over which, of course, we had no control. That was one of the reasons that he was focused now on following through on Greenland. This, of course, is a distraction. It's dramatic, getting ready for the president to go to Davos, where there'll be a great build-up to his speech there, and we'll see where this goes. Markets reacted because of the prospects of a transatlantic trade war. Certainly the EU reacting and saying we can't get the US-EU trade agreement through the European Parliament with this kind of action and rhetoric coming from my side of the Atlantic. So turbulent time, and as we've seen, the UK is of course not part of the EU, but part of Europe, and dealing with this as well.
What are the implications for NATO, Philip, especially if there is some form of movement, whether that's peaceful or not peaceful, from Donald Trump? And how serious do you think he is, especially in regard to a trade war?
Well, I think for NATO, we've seen strong statements, certainly from Denmark. Denmark has been an original founding member of NATO, a strong ally. They were with us in Iraq, which was not a NATO mission per se, but they came and had the highest per capita casualty rate during that exercise over more than a decade. I think if we were to follow through on this, as some of the rhetoric suggests, it could be the end of the alliance. You don't attack one of your allies within the alliance and take territory that is actually covered by the alliance.
So you think this could be the end of NATO? As serious as that?
Well, I think it's there. It's a possibility. I don't think President Trump wants to bring an end of NATO. I think this is deal making. This is, if you read The Art of the Deal, you ante up, you try to use leverage. Of course, the president loves to create drama, suspense to see what's next. There's a deal to be made here in terms of what he's described. We, the United States, feels we need from Greenland: basing, security, minerals. All of those things have been available to us completely under written documents to which we have agreed repeatedly. The Danes have agreed and made very clear that they are open to the U.S. Doing whatever in a NATO context to bring greater security to Greenland, should that be it. And of course, the opportunity to exploit the resources in Greenland, one which has been open to many countries for decades.
So why do you think he's doing this? What do you think his motivation actually is?
Well, again, I think there's a combination of drama, creating drama. He is focused on...
He's not doing it just to create drama, though, is he?
No, he's focused on Greenland and getting something there, a deal. He appointed the governor of Louisiana to be his special envoy for Greenland, someone who has no experience with diplomacy or with Greenland. Louisiana is kind of far away, but Louisiana brings back the idea of the Louisiana Purchase, one of the great deals in American history, of course. Vast amounts of territory purchased by the United States, expanding our manifest destiny. But that was really, in an early 19th century context, a little different than the world that we live in now, one of markets, one of alliances, one of very complex geopolitics. So I think this creates a certain level of drama that feeds the president's priorities as he sees them. They're very personal. His letters to the Norwegian prime minister, full of grievance over the Nobel Prize. That's a gathering of all of these factors that goes into so much of the way Donald Trump conducts this reality show that is indeed our reality.
Philip, thank you. That's Philip T. Rieker there, the former interim US ambassador to the UK, former Assistant Secretary of State for Europe. Listening to that, Jennifer Ewing, the spokeswoman for Republicans overseas, is it fair to say this is about creating drama? Is that fair?
Does President Trump not have enough drama in his life? I mean, it's only 1 year tomorrow since he's been inaugurated. No, this is not about drama. I think whether you agree or not, the president genuinely feels that there's going to be a battle in the Arctic, right? We all know, whether you believe in climate change or, climate crisis, whatever, the snow's melting. There's going to be amazing shipways going through Greenland. In addition, there's obviously these fabulous resources. And so it is susceptible to either China or Russia or some sort of enemy moving in there. Now, that might not look like invading, but it could be, trying to get the population of Greenland, covered. So I think they genuinely think that, one, this is a security risk, and after what's gone on in Russia and Ukraine over the last 3.5 years, the United States is, quite frankly, not trust NATO and the EU to protect itself, number one. And number two, it is absolutely about resources as well.
So why not do what Philip Rieker was talking about there and actually say, do a deal with Greenland, do a deal with Denmark, or maybe that's actually what's happening.
That is what we're doing. Exactly.
That's what's happening.
Exactly.
So you don't see tariffs, you don't see military action, you don't see invasion of any description, you don't see any of that happening.
Well, what is an invasion? How many people actually live there? 35,000, 50,000?
I think it's 60,000, but still, it is sovereign territory.
Okay, I do not think there's going to be an invasion under any circumstances. So let's look at the more relevant thing, which is the trade talk, the sanctions, obviously on the 8 countries that the president named. This is just exactly the same playbook. We're probably at stage 6 or something about, he slowly releases things out and then walks it back. I think the interesting thing for this country will be to see how Prime Minister Starmer, deals with this. Because
how should he deal with it? Because this morning he's talking tough on this, or tough for him anyway. But what should he say to Donald Trump the next time he sees him? He's going to be in Davos this week.
Sure. So bias is out on the table. I'm a dual citizen of the UK and the United States, so I like the special relationship. I think
you have to file your taxes in both.
Well, luckily we're taxed so high here that it's okay for the US, but you still have to pay somebody do it. Anyway,
slightly off topic.
Getting back to that. But the other thing to remember about President Trump is that he likes bilateral agreements.
Yes.
He does not like these supranational big organizations. He's very susceptible of the EU. That's why he was so excited about Brexit. So if I were the Prime Minister, I would make sure I had some one-on-one time with him to discuss what could be done. One other thing I'd like to bring up, and I know that it might not sound pertinent to what we're talking about, but I promise you it is lingering in the background.
Go for it.
Is the following. I think there are three ways in which our two countries are diverging right now that are important to the president and the America First sort of people, free speech and censorship,
Agreed.
unchecked illegal immigration,
Agreed.
and number three, and most importantly, is energy security, which of course brings national security. Don't forget that Trump was mocked back in 2018, 2019, for telling the Europeans, don't allow Nord Stream 2. Don't continue to be so reliant on Russian oil and gas. And then look what happened. They continued to buy Russian oil and gas, funding two sides of the Russia-Ukraine war. So, no, I'm very hopeful that while it's going to be messy, and sure, the markets are going to go up and down, but for the most part, I think a deal will be arranged. I do think the U.S. will end up with Greenland under its control, whether it's because they've paid the citizens of Greenland, $100,000, $1 million, whatever that they're talking about, or some other deals in some other ways are arranged with jobs, and obviously there'll be national security. But no, this is a very big priority for him. This is
what
not
about
drama.
the Danes in all of this? They've been really clear they don't want it. The Greenlanders seem to be pretty clear they don't want it either, although independence. What about if they say make us independent, but we'll do a very good deal with America so that you're not actually our president, but we are independent from Denmark? I mean, there's so many. The kaleidoscope is shifting here, isn't it?
Exactly, completely. And I think we don't know. We don't know how it all ends up. But I do think there'll be very large American involvement because of what I just said. America right now does not trust the EU to look after this very, very important region, the Arctic.
Yeah. I wonder, just before you go, Jennifer, if I could ask you just about one story we're going to talk about in a second, which is about Jewish people in this country. And Robert Garson, who is Trump's personal lawyer, said he had been in talks with the State Department about potentially providing sanctuary for Jewish people in this country fleeing anti-Semitism in the UK. We've seen, very controversially, white South Africans, for example, being offered sanctuary in the US. I just wonder what you make of that particular thought by Trump's lawyer, by Robert Garson.
I think it's really interesting, and I think if we talk, we're always told, in this country or other countries, like, let's look after refugees, let's look after people who are fleeing places where they don't feel safe. I'm not a Jewish person, I'm Catholic, but I certainly have enough Jewish friends that simply don't actually feel that safe right now in the United Kingdom, which is quite sad. So if the United States can be a place where they feel more safe, then great. I'm happy to have that conversation.
Okay. Jennifer, thank you as always. That's Jennifer Ewing there, spokeswoman for Republicans Overseas UK. Really, really interesting points that she made there, and Philip Rieger making as well. What did you think of them? 0344 499 1000. We're going to continue the conversation right through until 7 o'clock. You can text me on 87222 as well. Loads to discuss. And actually, what we've just talked about with Jennifer about the US considering asylum for British Jews. We'll speak to Stephen Silverman from the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism in just a second about all of that. So loads to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk Drive.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Well, some breaking news this afternoon that the Independent Office for Police Conduct has launched an investigation into West Midlands Police. This follows the retirement of Craig Guilford, the former Chief Constable, over the ban of Maccabi Tel Aviv fans attending a match with Aston Villa. There's an awful lot around on this today, and I wanted to speak to Stephen Silverman about a number of different issues affecting our Jewish friends and neighbours. He's Director of Investigations and Enforcement of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Stephen, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Do you welcome this inquiry into the by the IOPC? I mean, to me, what often seems to be the case is that the officers in question resign or retire, and then the investigation happens, and I wonder what they can really do. They could, in theory, take this guy's pension away from him, but I doubt if they're going to do that. I also wonder whether that gets to the real heart of the issue, because it wasn't just one police officer who was involved with this.
Well, I think that's the nub of it, Peter. This was never just about Craig Guilford. This whole sordid saga will have had the hands of a number of senior officers all over it. I mean, it is absolutely right that the IOPC investigates at this point. He can't just disappear into the sunset with no consequences. But given the news that emerged over the weekend of West Midlands Police refusing to investigate properly anti-Semitic hate crime, even an assault on a young Jewish girl.
And just for viewers and listeners who might be coming to this story cold, this was the Telegraph, a dossier obtained by them, including internal emails and police crime logs, appears to show West Midlands Police disregarding complaints about alleged anti-Semitism and extremism raised by members of the Jewish community, including a former police volunteer who claimed she was dismissed by the force after raising concerns. Its Prevent unit, designed to intervene early in cases of possible radicalisation, is also facing criticism after appearing to ignore multiple reports of extremism and anti-Jewish hatred.
Yeah, indeed. So look, I mean, this is clearly not about one man. There is an institutional problem. There is something deeply rotten from top to bottom, and it seems that we're at the point where West Midlands Police needs to be put into special measures. But the question it then raises is that if in our second city, our fifth largest police force can be so easily manipulated so that it is applying the law, not even-handedly, but in favour of one minority against another, then it is inconceivable that it isn't also happening elsewhere. Yeah. The authorities need to wake up, get a grip of this, because it's not just the police. You know, the public sector is rife with this right now. It is in our criminal justice system. It's in our education. It's in our hospitals. And until someone gets a grip of this, we are heading into a dark place from which it is going to be very, very difficult to emerge.
Sarah Jones, who's the policing minister, will be meeting the acting West Midlands Chief Constable to discuss how to rebuild public confidence in the force, the Home Office tells us. What should she do? What should she say?
Well, what she needs to do is make sure there's a proper clear out. We can't just have more of the same.
Do you think that's going to happen?
I sincerely hope it is. I hope there's enough scrutiny now on the force and those who are tasked with sorting it out to ensure that it happens. Because if we just get more of the same, nothing is going to change, and we won't even begin to repair the damage that has been done, because it's not just damage to West Midlands Police, it's damage to the reputation of policing in the UK in general. You know, our survey that we conducted towards the end of last year showed that only 14% of Jewish people have confidence that police would protect them properly. Mm-hmm. I can only imagine what that number would be were that survey to be carried out now. So we have a systemic problem in West Midlands Police and probably beyond, and it needs tough people to take a tough stance on this. Otherwise, we are heading for disaster.
Shazay, a spokesman for the West Midlands Police, said the force will never tolerate any form of hate crime, and the staff treat everyone equally, whatever their race, sexual orientation, disability, faith, age or gender. I mean, that's demonstrably not true. All hate crime is deplorable, and our communities can be reassured we take all reports seriously. We look to assess information to establish if an offence has occurred, and then follow available lines of inquiry to identify and prosecute offenders. We will now work tirelessly to rebuild confidence in West Midlands Police. Stephen, I want to ask you about something else, which is that the number of schools commemorating the Holocaust has halved since the 7th of October. We know that Holocaust Memorial Day is coming up later this month. We'll certainly be marking it here on Talk. And I just wonder, from your perspective, I mean, it seems very clear to me that, first of all, the National Education Union is riddled with anti-Semitism, and perhaps you could give us your perspective on that. But secondly, there's a lot of pearl clutching in this. There's a lot of people who don't want to offend anybody, even by commemorating one of the most horrendous things that has ever happened in the history of this planet.
Yeah, I mean, it's another facet of the same problem that one assumes, and I don't think it's unreasonable to assume, that it's the same extremist views that were on show in the West Midlands Police that are trying to prevent schools from showing respect, remembrance and sympathy for the Jewish people, for an utterly unique and never heard of trauma that took place during the Nazi occupation of Europe. And it is astonishing that for all the work that has been done on Holocaust remembrance for the very purpose of ensuring that it can't happen again, not just to Jews, but to anybody, to shut this down because there are people who will be offended by it. I mean, this is not what Britain is. This is deeply, deeply shameful. If the NEU are complicit in it, then again, you know, that needs to be dealt with very, very severely. If schools are buckling in under pressure that's coming from activist groups, they need to be supported. And this needs to be turned around because, as I say, what happened in the West Midlands and what's happening here are just all part of the same problem. It feels as though it's accelerating now. This wave, this tsunami of hostility towards Jews and everything to do with their identity is out of control.
And it comes into the Iranian issue as well, Stephen. I wonder what your perspective is on this, because if you think about protecting minorities, the Holocaust was about many things, but it was about silencing minorities. The Jewish minority, the Roma minority, gay people, socialists, anybody who Hitler and the Nazis didn't like. It was about killing them. It was about wiping them off the face of the earth. 6 million Jews, 6 million others. Estimates go up to 17 or 18 million, depending on which estimates that you look at. It's impossible that we'll ever know the full truth of the horror of the Holocaust. Yet we have people who say, many left-wing activists, and some not on the left as well, who say they support, for example, the Palestinian people. Where are they now supporting the Iranian people? Loads of Jewish people I know are supporting the Iranian people. There was a big rally yesterday. Loads of Jewish people were there. Loads of people know that the Iranians in the UK have often supported the Israelis, so they're repaying the favour, and they feel very, very strongly about that issue. We have a minority here. We have people in Iran who are being brutalized, who are being repressed, who are being denied basic human rights by the regime there. And we have very, very brave and very public-spirited Jewish people and others who are supporting them. Yet there are loads on the left who don't seem to think that rape is a weapon of war, that repression of women, repression of all people, is actually something they want to support. They'll support it when it comes to the Palestinians, but they won't when it comes to the Iranians. And that, to me, is incredibly nakedly straightforward, Stephen. I wonder what your thoughts are on it.
Events in Iran have completely blown the lid off the narrative that the hate marches that we've seen on our streets for over 2 years now have been trying to con the general public with. These were anti-Semitic hate marches cloaked in the language of humanitarianism in order to shield them from scrutiny. You know, there is a glib saying that you will regularly encounter on social media that is very apt here. No Jews, no news. Yeah. Look at the events in Iran. Look at the events in Somalia, Sudan, Ethiopia, and elsewhere in that region.
We've been talking about Syria on this programme today, and there are loads of people who don't seem to think it's a story. I've been gone in touch with people saying, the breakdown of peace in Syria isn't a story. All those other issues you've been talking about, we try to cover things equally, and you're absolutely right. It's some people are more important than others, and if Israel's wrong, well then it's going to be a news story.
There is an immense tolerance, and one might say even indifference, towards deaths in the Middle East, unless it is the world's only Jewish state defending itself against genocidal, murderous, anti-Semitic terrorists. That gets people out on the streets, nothing else. The sheer hypocrisy of it is astonishing. And you would think that at some point the scales would fall from people's eyes and they would realize the extent to which they have been conned by this movement. Hopefully, we're at the beginning of that process.
I had a very interesting day yesterday. I was in Finchley in North London, and there was a really brilliant vigil there with a few people who were mostly Jewish, not all, but mostly Jewish, who were remembering, of course, the what has happened in Israel and the fact that there's still a hostage body missing. They've been supporting the hostages since the 7th of October. I spoke and was giving my solidarity to them, to that group. They were also, of course, talking about anti-Semitism in this country. And one woman I spoke to, in fact, the reason I was there was because viewers and listeners may remember recently, a couple of weeks ago, a woman called Jane rang in and said she is moving from Leeds to Israel because she doesn't feel safe in this country anymore. And that is something which, as Stephen will know far better than I will, is happening time and time and time again. So, Stephen, I just wonder what you make of what the United States State Department has been lobbied about. This is Trump's personal lawyer, Robert Garson, who has said that he's been in talks with the State Department about providing sanctuary for Jews fleeing anti-Semitism in the UK. What do you make of this, Stephen?
When you consider that Jews are a small minority in this country, they came to this country, they were intensely patriotic. All they wanted to do was work and give back to the country what the country gave to them. Every Saturday in synagogue at Shabbat services at the end, things stop for a prayer for the government of the UK and for the health of the royal family. For that minority,
we sang the national anthem yesterday at the end of that vigil.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely. Now it's a national shame. It is an awful stain on the reputation of this country. And the thing is, of course, the USA itself has problems. Jews have been killed in terrorist attacks in the USA. But the same survey that I referred to earlier showed that around half of British Jews no longer feel that they are welcome in this country. I think the number is 61% have
I remember that survey, and it was done by organisation, I think, and it was 61% thinking of leaving.
So this is a route some people might want to take. Who knows? But for us to have arrived at this position, there is a saying, it's a cliche, and I've used it many times, so have many other people: Jews are canaries in the coal mine. They are the early warning sign that there is something deeply wrong in society. There is a sickness that is taking hold. This is where we are now, and we need the authorities to act before it becomes incurable.
I quoted the poem "And Then They Came For Me" yesterday during the talk that I gave in Finchley. Stephen, thank you, as always, for joining us. That's Stephen Silverman there, the Director of Investigations and Enforcement of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Thank you to Steve, who says it's also possible Trump could be seeking to make Greenland an unincorporated territory similar to Guam or Puerto Rico. That would probably be his expectation. Joanna in Salisbury says, "Hi Cardi P, Donald Trump has proved his point. Mass panic, everyone's running around, we can't protect Greenland. The UK sent one man, not a battalion, one man, plus the EU sent a couple of ships, and it took time because they can't work together. if the Russians or Chinese had the wherewithal, they would have been all over Greenland before the EU had even discussed it. I think that's a fair point, Joanna, and thank you for it from Salisbury. We're going to talk about what's in the Sun tomorrow. John Lucas is standing by. He is the night news editor. We'll have a chat with him. We will also take your calls, text, tweets and voice notes. Keep sending them in, keep dialing, and we'll get as many people on the air as we can between now and 7 o'clock. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of people want to get in on Greenland, and I will, of course, take as many of those calls as I can between now and 7 o'clock here on Talk Drive. We're also expecting Yvette Cooper, who is the Foreign Secretary, of course, to say something. If that happens in our time, we'll bring it to you live from Parliament. But in the meantime, I want to speak to John Lucas, who's the night news editor at The Sun. Evening to you, about all of this and how The Sun is covering it in tomorrow's paper. John, a big and developing story, lots of different aspects to it.
Yeah, Greenland, well, it's the story everyone's talking about. I mean, on the face of it, it just all sounds completely bonkers. Why does Donald Trump want to go and potentially seize this sort of, you know, for a lot of people, it's an obscure territory up north somewhere where it's really, really cold. You know, what's it all about? What's the point of it? The argument from the hawkish point of view, Donald Trump would say, is that they want to create this Golden Dome defence system, which we've seen in action in Israel, and he's saying it's absolutely essential that we can have control of this territory for that. Also, of course, it's all about rare earth minerals, the sorts of stuff that goes into all of our high-tech defence weapons, but also
our phones.
Our phones.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
and that's the point. You know, Sun readers might say, "Look, why do I care about it?" But that is part of the point. That you can have this hawkish argument that if we are really heading into a sort of a situation where world's at war, or potentially, you know, we're in conflict with Russia or China, why should the US leave anything to doubt? We should make sure that we secure these territories that have all the resources. And we know Trump did this deal with Zelensky in Ukraine, which is all about rare earth minerals, if you remember. Very distasteful way of doing it, and this is all very distasteful. And you know, even Nigel Farage has come out today and said, look, the way you're going about this, threatening to put these tariffs on your oldest allies, is just absolutely wrong. And you know, Farage pointed out, look, I've always backed President Trump, but this is no way to behave. And we had heard obviously similar from Keir Starmer this morning, in a bit more of a sort of you know, blathering, wishy-washy way, some people might say. But well, I mean, Starmer did say that he doesn't really believe that Trump would go in militarily, and he's probably right, because we know Trump has this style of negotiating which is always done, which is to ask for something ridiculous and then sort of chip away until he gets something that he does want. I mean, Greenland, the estimated price tag, if you were going to sit down and buy it rather than sees it, is about $520 billion, which is about 80% of the US defence budget.
Yes.
So, you know, he's probably not going to seize it militarily, he's probably not going to buy it. There's going to be some sort of third way. But what will it be?
It'll be fascinating to see what happens. Tell us about another story. We've been covering Syria a little bit today, and there are lots of people who will ignore this story, but actually it could have major, major implications for us, especially when it comes to Shamima Begum.
Yeah, I mean, Syria, it's all kicking off in Syria. It has been for 20 years. I mean, if people aren't familiar with who's supposedly running the place now, it's basically this guy who used to be in Al-Qaeda.
But he's lovely now. He's lovely and fluffy. Alistair Campbell's met him. Rory Stewart's met him. They've given him a big hug, so he's lovely now.
Yeah, he's been over to America. He seems to be all right. But, I mean, he's not all right. There's this horrible conflict that we've seen.
Yeah.
Horrible abuses against civilians that we've seen. And the crux of this conflict is this government is locking horns with the SDF, which is a Kurdish militia, essentially. Now, the problem from our point of view, from the Western point of view, is it's the Kurdish militias who run the prison camps that hold all the Islamic State fighters. About 9,000 fighters and about 40,000 women and children sort of allied to Islamic State, including Shamima Begum. And there's fighting around these camps, and it does appear that some people have tried to use this as an opportunity to escape.
How likely is it, do you think, Shamima Begum could come back? I mean, it's a very, very febrile situation.
Yeah,
volatile.
Well, I mean, it can't, at the moment, we thought that the whole issue of her citizenship had been decided, but it's back in the courts again. Her lawyers have taken it to the European Court of Human Rights, and they've given the Home Office some sort of formal questions to respond to. What they're essentially saying is, well, has the government failed to consider whether she was a victim of trafficking? So, as you know, she went off and married an Islamic State fighter and had kids over there, and she was, you know, all the information that exists is she was very, very involved in the policing side of Islamic State, which it involves all sorts of terrible human rights abuses, and we know
torture.
The awful organisation that Islamic State was, and you know, I don't think it's any secret. A very large proportion of the country would not want her back here.
Totally. I'm part of that proportion. Tell us about another story. I love this story. I love when these things happen, and I've seen these kind of stories before. This is brilliant. This is a thief. He snatched a tourist's phone on the streets of London. Got a slightly more than they bargained for.
Yes. Well, it's an epidemic, isn't it, of phone theft, and it's terrible when our tourists have to endure this. And this is all about Elizabeth Lopez Aguilar. She's a 24-year-old woman from Texas, and she was over here on a tour of London, and she was going to go onto London Eye, and she'd put her phone down on a wall or something to film a TikTok video, as we all do. Sure, you're on there just as I am.
I am very viral.
Filming my TikTok. Yeah, I can imagine. And yeah, so she's filming a TikTok video, and some little scrote comes and snatches the phone, and it's quite a good video. You can see it on the website, and you can, you know, he snatches it and you see him running away. Little did he know that Miss Aguilar is a competitive runner from Texas. She's a very, very fit lady. She's training for a grueling Ironman competition. Brilliant. And she'd only just come off the back of doing very, very well in a sprint triathlon.
The wrong mess with the wrong person.
Which she finished under 2 hours, and she was able to catch this guy up. She said, at first I thought it was my boyfriend playing a prank, but I realised it was real. But I was shocked, but immediately I kicked into full gear. She chased this guy down.
John, thank you. That's John Lucas there in the Night News editor at The Sun. We're just going to go live to the House of Commons. Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary.
And them alone. This reflects the fundamental principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity to which this whole House is committed. Second, the use or the threat of tariffs against allies in this way is completely wrong, it is unwarranted, and it is counterproductive. Third, Arctic security is a shared concern and a shared responsibility for both sides of the Atlantic. It can only be effectively addressed and maintained through a cooperation between transatlantic allies and, crucially, through NATO. So instead of divisions that only aid our adversaries, we now need a serious and constructive dialogue about our Arctic security, which is built on respect for sovereignty and collective security and the rules which underpin our alliance. As the Prime Minister set out this morning, the North Star for the government's foreign policy is to stand up for the UK's national interest, to defend and advance Britain's security, Britain's prosperity and Britain's values. And we do so through the alliances and partnerships that we build abroad that make us stronger here at home, including alliances where that transatlantic cooperation between Europe and North America has long been vital. As the Prime Minister has made clear, our close and deep-rooted partnership with the United States is a hugely important part of our security and our prosperity. The depth of our cooperation on intelligence sharing and defence helps keep us safe, and our trading relationship and the new agreements we have reached in the last 12 months are driving billions of pounds of investment in the UK, supporting jobs across the country. But the Prime Minister has also made clear that we will be very direct about our differences, as he was in speaking to President Trump yesterday. Because standing up for the UK national interest means the defending the principles that underpin stable and enduring international cooperation. That means respect for sovereignty, and it means respect for long-standing allies. Denmark is a close ally of the United Kingdom and the United States. Indeed, Denmark has long been one of the US's closest allies, a proud NATO member that has stood shoulder to shoulder with the UK and with the US, including at real human cost in recent decades. Rooted in that partnership, the US already has in place a 1951 treaty with Denmark, which already provides for an extensive US security presence in Greenland. And alliances endure because they are built on respect and partnership, not pressure. And tariff threats like this are no way to treat allies. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, the tariff threat has come following the pre-coordinated preparations for the annual Danish programme of activities under the framework Arctic Endurance, which is focused on addressing Russian security threats in the Arctic. And last week, at the request of the Danish government, one UK military officer currently based in Denmark joined a planning group visit in an observational capacity. And these sorts of visits are a regular part of military planning ahead of exercises and operations. Work amongst allies to strengthen Greenland's security that should be recognised for its importance, not used as a reason to impose economic pressure. A trade war would hurt workers and businesses on both sides of the Atlantic. It would be in no one's interests. Both sides of the Atlantic should be working together on Arctic security, not moving apart. And that is why the Prime Minister and this government are working intensively in the UK national interest to prevent this happening and to reach a resolution. Yesterday, the Prime Minister spoke directly with President Trump, with the Danish Prime Minister and other close allies and international leaders. Today, I welcomed the Danish Foreign Minister, Lars Rasmussen, here to London for valuable discussions earlier today, and the Europe Minister has been in touch with the Greenland Foreign Minister. I've also been in direct contact with the US, Canada, France, Germany, and other European colleagues, and on Wednesday, my Right Honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, will visit Denmark. We will continue with this urgent diplomacy in pursuit of the principles that I have set out. And we will also argue for the strengthening of our multilateral cooperation around Arctic security. Because the Arctic is the gateway for Russia's Northern Fleet to threaten Britain, Western Europe, and North America. Threats to undersea cables, threats to critical national infrastructure. We've seen greater presence of Russian ships and submarines making their way to the North Atlantic. We've seen Russian aircraft testing our air defence. as shadow fleet vessels pass through our waters trying to evade our sanctions and continuing to fund the war in Ukraine. Northern Norway, Finland, sea routes through Greenland, Iceland, UK gaps have long been strategically significant when considering Russian threats. And we know that the strategic significance of the Arctic is likely to grow as the melting of Arctic ice stands to open new routes through the Arctic Ocean and with newfound geo-economic competition for critical minerals and rare earths. So Arctic security is crucial not just to the UK, but to the entire NATO alliance. Of the 8 countries north of the Arctic Circle, 7 are NATO allies. So across our alliance, working together, we can and should do more. So that is why last week I travelled to Finland and Norway to discuss the threats they currently face. My right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, was also in Sweden. And in Helsinki, I met with the Finnish Foreign Minister and was briefed on their border force activities to tackle a Russian ship that had damaged undersea cables between Finland and Estonia.
Yvette Cooper there, the Foreign Secretary, giving an update to Parliament on the Greenland situation. She talked about meeting the Danish Prime Minister and Danish Foreign Minister. She talked about the cooperation that is being done, very strong action that she says should be taken to dissuade America from any form of invasion. We'll get more on that in just a few minutes' time. We'll take some of your calls and voice notes on it too here on Talk Drive. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, has been speaking to Parliament. Replying to her now is the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Dame Priti Patel. Let's hear a little bit from her.
Nations put their interests first and guard their sovereignty. It goes on to say that we stand for sovereign rights of nations. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Greenland and Denmark. The future of Greenland must be for its people and Denmark to decide. It is theirs to decide alone. Denmark is a valued NATO ally and a leading contributor to Ukraine, indeed one of the highest per capita donors. We've also worked with Denmark on Arctic security, and it is an imperative that we and our European NATO allies now show a determination to go much further and back up our words with actions.
Priti Patel there, the Shadow Foreign Secretary. If there's anything really significant, of course, we'll bring it to you in the next few minutes before 7. I want to play a few voice notes now on the Greenland situation and a few other things as well. Dan has been in touch.
On Trump and Greenland, just look what China's doing in Africa, how many countries it's gone into to take and extract their wealth. And I think Trump probably thinks in years to come, if he doesn't take control of Greenland, then China will. Yes, there's rules and he could do it with diplomacy, but I think that's their long-term goal.
Thank you for that, Dan. Let's hear from Mark.
You've had all these people coming out saying, oh, it'd be the end of NATO if Russia attacked Greenland. People don't realise we've had wars between NATO countries before. Look at Greece and Turkey in 1974 fighting over Cyprus. That didn't get rid of NATO, did it? You know, these things happen. If the Americans need it for security, give it them. At the end of the day, they're keeping us all secure.
Mark, thank you. Anna?
I'm just listening to you and your guest decide whether Donald Trump is a dictator or not. Well, the list of grievances you've just spoken about, they're exactly what our own esteemed dictator, Keir Starmer, is doing. So if Donald Trump's a dictator, I'm afraid so is Keir Starmer. No difference, if you ask me.
Anna, thanks for your thoughts on that. Let's hear what Ollie in London thinks about all of this. Ollie's giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You're very welcome to the programme, Ollie. What would you like to say?
Hi, yeah. Well, the main thing, I mean, everyone's talking about Greenland, Trump invading, but what I really would like to know is why was
listen, that's a matter for the police. It's an active police matter, Ollie, and I'm afraid we can't talk about that because we don't have prejudice legal action about that, and that's not what Ollie said he was calling in about. So we're going to hear another voice note from Ian on facial recognition.
Just talking about facial recognition cameras. So they identify known criminals, all right? So they're known criminals, so why aren't they in jail in the first place? So once again, these people are out on the street because our judiciary are so inept and so weak that they're putting normal citizens at risk. There's no need to facial recognition if there's proper justice in this country.
Thank you for that, Ian. Let's go to Mark in Lincolnshire for a final word on Greenland. Mark, what do you think Trump is up to here?
Hi there, Peter.
Hi, Mark.
Hi there. Yeah, I think the thing that seems to get missed, I think, with this conversation is the real reason why I think Trump's very much interested in this, which I think is the same, to an extent, the same reason most American presidents go on about Greenland or have done over the decades. But I think it's really evident at the moment is China. China's the real problem here. Because what people don't seem to mention too much is that right now in Greenland, I believe they have it's at least 2,000, it's like 3,000 miners in Greenland that are basically taking out, raping, whatever word you want to use, raping those rare earth minerals that everybody bangs on about that we all need. And who let them in there? Who let the Chinese in there to do that? It was the Europeans. It was the Danes. So can you really blame him when he's trying to secure rare earth minerals for American industry?
I think a lot of what Trump is doing is very logical, actually. I don't want him to invade. I don't want anybody to die. I don't want anything to happen that's not peaceful and reasonable. The Danes say this isn't going to happen. But I can see his logic. I can see where he's coming from a defence and security and an economic perspective as well.
Absolutely, Peter. I think it's just, as I say, at the end of the day, Europe are a heck of a lot more in bed with China than America is. You know, there's a lot of debt that's owned by the Chinese, which is probably why the massive super embassy, the spy embassy, is going to be built in London. That's probably got a lot to do with it.
Mark, you make some really good points. We're just going to leave it there just for time, but thank you, Mark in Lincolnshire. Kevin O'Sullivan's here and is on the other side of the news. Hi, Kev. What's coming up in your show?
Two big stories. We're kicking off with a window into Labour's tortured soul. Why do they hate the British flags so much? We've got a Oxford councillor, veteran Labourite, who asked if the police could lie in